Our story begins by talking about freedom, romance, and adventure, all characteristics of the world's best virtual reality game, the infamous Chrono Life. The work starts with our dear protagonist being humiliated by other players in a public square. For being weak and utterly useless, he is rejected by all hunting groups. He cries, screams, and throws a tantrum until he sees a beautiful girl heading his way. She shyly invites him on an adventure, and our boy, who is not foolish, quickly accepts. As they walk through a forest, the protagonist boasts about receiving a few coins from a previous day's adventure. He explains that he bought as many beginner packages as he could, even won a sword by opening one. The girl is amazed and compliments him. The boy is soon moved, starts imagining a lifetime with her. At one point, they arrive at a deserted location. The girl stops and warns him that they have reached the adventure spot. The protagonist is confused for a moment, and shortly after, he is surprised and injured by his companion. Already on the ground with red paint dripping from his body, he wonders why this is happening. The girl quickly responds that she never had any interest in a failure like him. Since someone like that was useless in the game, surely was nothing in real life either, couldn't even talk to her if they were out of the game. And at the peak of her wickedness, she says that his parents must be beggars. It's at this moment that the boy becomes furious, and then when he tries to react, he is split in half in the blink of an eye. The system warns that the conditions have been met. The transition to the hidden class has begun. Surrounded by a mysterious energy, the girl transforms. She gains wings like an angel and takes on an appearance similar to a cosmic being. Her new class is called Goddess of Life, a category reached when one manages to eliminate 1,000 players. It was at that moment, just before dying, that the protagonist understood the essence of the game. Here what matters is the law of the jungle. The boy resurrects in the safe area after losing a lot of experience. With a downcast face, he recalls all the difficulties he went through. With great determination, he pulls out his big extras hammer and uses it to try to reinforce his knight's sword, but unfortunately fails to improve his weapon, and it breaks. In another desperate attempt, the protagonist tries to upgrade his gloves, and then something surprising happens. He fails again. When all his equipment fails to be upgraded, he loses everything. However, he gains a stick, a basic weapon for beginners. The protagonist is confused because the one who gave him the overpowered stick was a bald man, who seems to be nice. And once again, the boy tries to reinforce his weapon, but this time it works. He continuously improves it, believing that sooner or later the stick would break, because the higher the weapon level, the substantially higher the risk of failure. After a long time reinforcing the item, he reaches the incredible mark of the supreme stick of level plus 99. The boy doesn't understand the sense of this because after upgrading the same weapon 10 times, the success rate is 5%. When the boy finished evolving his weapon, he accidentally tests it by dropping it on the ground, and then the continent is split in two with just one stroke. What happened here? On this day, a new Guinness record was set within the history of games as the boy eliminated 800,000 players in a single moment. Now, yes, our protagonist was inspired to play. It's time to show who the main character of the work is. Then we are presented with the story of the boy. In reality, outside the game, he's just a normal person with a common appearance and height, doesn't stand out in studies or sports. Explaining his life in game terms, he's around bronze 4. But now it's different because he's the protagonist. During a leisurely stroll, our blessed stick boy finds everything he wanted most, a guinea pig to test his special weapon on. He bumps into a beefy bald guy who quickly pulls him aside for a private chat. The protagonist gives the watermelon head a basic humiliation and then lightly taps his face with the stick, just to make him feel the pressure, and the guy simply evaporates. Our protagonist is already feeling confident, but unfortunately, the happiness of the poor lasts little. Because his stick is losing durability, he becomes worried. It turns out that the weapon needs repairing because it will break after a few hits. In summary, the weapon's usage limit is 5 times. He had used the weapon twice. With just 3 more hits, the boy already starts dreaming, saying he will get revenge on all who belittled him and especially the girl who betrayed him. Suddenly, we are taken to a different scenario where the ground is filled with skulls. The name of this place is the Valley of the Dead. It is where the 2-headed dragon called Urus resides, the strongest boss in the game, that is, before our boy awakens the hack. The dragon blabbers on, but soon the boy grows tired of listening and attacks. The monster loses a head and becomes perplexed. The cold and calculating protagonist comments that he's only interested in grabbing the game's strongest reward after defeating him. Urus begins to tremble, even asks the boy to wait, but he's not there to talk and delivers another blow that further injures the dragon. Then our boy starts complaining about the weapon's resistance, especially since he only had 1 more attack. After this, the durability of the weapon would run out and the legendary stick would unfortunately break. Hearing this, Urus proposes a contract. The dragon's proposal is to transform the protagonist's stick into an ego sword. Basically, he will infuse his own soul into the weapon, which will give our boy's sword its own ego and evolve it into an ego sword. This results in infinite durability of the weapon and short, more hack. The dragon also says that the ego sword is the strongest in Chrono Life. The protagonist starts to find it amusing, says he had already given up on revenge. But it seems like the heavens want this revenge to happen. Very well, he accepts the contract happily. A magic circle forms and Eurus' body disappears. Some system messages appear notifying that the level 99 plus stick is now an ego-ranked weapon and has infinite durability. Once again, our boy reaffirms that he will have his revenge. Back in the central square of Chrono Life, we see there's an SSS rank reward for the head of the protagonist with the strongest stick in that world. They say he killed over 800,000 people in a single day, which is the largest known death streak. It's also declared that these wanted posters have been distributed across 12 kingdoms and 3 continents around the world. The value of the protagonist's head is nothing less than 10 billion gold. Moments later, some knights appear marching. They are the royal guards. Leading the march was the master of the sacred guild called Suntri, who particularly is a quite beautiful girl, but perhaps she stands no chance against the supreme stick. Knights from another guild appear, cloaked in scarlet with a white cross. The 10 strongest elite knights known as the Lineage of the Cross. The guild's general is named Suo. To add some variety, the author included a sorceress, the strongest of the royal family and also master of the holy guild called Abracadabra. The last leaders finally appear, the chief of the thieves guild named Hong and the king of the castle Arden, leader of the justice guild, Eye of the Falcon. These are the 5 largest guilds, all gathered in one place. This is the first alliance made between the top 5 guilds in the world. The king of Castle Arden, as the head of the union, declares war against the hideous player killer, or rather, war against the protagonist with the blessed stick. The story continues with the boy having a fit of laughter. Increasing the durability of his equipment has given him greater self-esteem. Now he just has to wait for the wafers to come. Suddenly, a head pops out of his stick, and guess who it is? Yes, Eurus, our dear crybaby, the one who trembled against the ratty fishing rod bearer. Of course, the protagonist, curious as he is, asks whose head that is because it can't be his, right? Eurus immediately identifies himself. The protagonist notices that the monster's size has considerably decreased, making him more like a pet than a dragon. The burning question is, where did Eurus' second head go, the 2-headed dragon? Well, not even he knows. Suddenly, a pamphlet falls in front of the protagonist, who picks it up and finds his face printed on it. The dwarf dragon quickly gets excited, saying he's wanted for eliminating 800,000 players at once. Not an achievement for just anyone, plus the lad is worth 10 billion gold, meaning that's real money, right? That's a lot. While the protagonist wonders how an ally can use words like money, it should be impossible to have knowledge of real-world related words. Eurus responds that since he's practically dead, that doesn't matter much. The dragon wonders what they're going to do, since with such a high reward, several people will go after the boy's life. So the dwarf dragon suggests eradicating all humans right away. But that wouldn't work out very well because the boy is human. But he's not scared at all. In fact, he's quite excited because he's become a celebrity. Now that things have turned out this way, the protagonist thinks he'll have to hide his powers because otherwise, people will think he's weak. While walking, he's suddenly hit by an arrow. The supreme commander of the Union of the 5 Great Guilds, the king of Castle Arden, was nearby with his knights. The boy finds himself surrounded with several soldiers behind him. While he was still down, they ordered him to be arrested. But you know the saying, soft water, hard stone, the stick hits until it pierces. So our boy gets up and everyone starts attacking him all at once. The boy says he's changed his mind about getting revenge now and he just wants to live peacefully. But before that, of course, he has to annihilate everyone there. In just an instant, the capital of the first kingdom is completely destroyed. Then the boy heads towards the king of Castle Arden. Meanwhile, the castle king calls all the members of the Union. A massive teleportation occurs, summoning all the protagonist's enemies to fight against him. They all try to attack it once again, but after a few blows, the enemy's advantage decreases considerably. Even Eurus, the great boss of that game, is impressed by such power. He admits that no matter how strong the boss is, you can't deal with thousands of people at the same time, and the Union Guild shouldn't be a weak opponent. A group of rankings scattered all over the world together to defeat a common enemy. Perhaps Eurus wouldn't be able to deal with it even if he mobilized his entire army. But in fact, the dwarf dragon misinterpreted everything. The protagonist wasn't trapped with the Union, they were the ones trapped with the protagonist. Then the strongest sorceress in the royal family decides to act. She cast a magical enchantment called Ancient Magical Disintegration of Destruction. As a giant attack descends from the sky, our boy can only praise the beautiful name of this magic. He thinks his blows should also have a name. With just one attack, that magic easily breaks. And before the sorcerers could do anything, he attacks again. On this day, a legend was born. The World Union Guild was completely defeated. The king of Castle Arden was probably the only survivor. The protagonist approaches him and says he didn't kill him on purpose. It was difficult to control the force of the blow because of him. Then the king of Castle Arden asks why he was spared. The young man replies it's obvious, saying it was because earlier he had shot an arrow at him. With the figurative fishing rod, our boy just gave the Union leader a slap on the face. As expected, that battle became the most talked about subject among people in the real world, not only among users of the game itself, but also among users of other games. Even among people who weren't interested in such things, after defeating everyone there, the protagonist strikes a macho alpha pose. However, one more person appears, and you won't believe who it is. Yes, my friends. The girl who betrayed the protagonist at the beginning of the story. The boy is shocked. The girl says she missed him. Who could have imagined such a meeting, right? A vast expanse of sunset plains emerged with 3 million players eliminated, along with several weapons scattered on the ground. Meanwhile, our protagonist was in a meeting with the girl who betrayed him. Thinking this situation is somewhat dramatic, he wonders why he can't stop laughing. The girl soon starts talking, suggesting it must be fate. She didn't expect to find him in that place. The boy says fate is nonsense. The girl starts talking again and comments that she only killed him earlier to attain the Goddess of Life class. The protagonist asks if her ranking changed only after eliminating 1,000 players. With a condition like that, shouldn't it be Goddess of Death? The boy starts attacking shortly after, saying that as he had already heard her funny story, it was time for them to fight. The girl asks if he isn't too hasty. She wanted to talk a little more. Then the young man tries another attack, and when he thinks the target has been hit, she appears by his side, saying that, as expected, he has become considerably stronger. But that level of power wouldn't be enough to win. Beerus is shocked, wondering how that person is alive after a direct hit from the legendary stick. The protagonist is also confused. He's sure the attack was accurate. So how could she be without a scratch? The girl says she's now the Goddess of Life. Because of that, a mere human couldn't do absolutely anything. Hearing this, the boy gets angry and tries to attack again. With this last blow, the entire continent trembles. But the goddess remains unharmed. She says it's useless to keep fighting. No matter how much time passes, he would be unable to win. Faced with this, the boy tries a different approach. Since he can't destroy her, he just needs to destroy the planet. Then everything would disappear, including the girl. The goddess doesn't seem to find that possible. However, the protagonist says he hasn't used his true strength at any moment. He says he's willing to sacrifice everything because in the end, in Chrono Life, the law of the jungle is the only thing that matters. With a single attack, the boy destroys the entire world, which ends up disconnecting all the players. Then people wake up in the virtual reality capsule room and start complaining to the attendant, asking if he turned off the switch or something similar. He asks everyone to stay calm. Sometime later, a notification appears on the main page of Chrono Life. They announce that an emergency maintenance is happening on the server. People wonder if there really is a problem with the game. There was still one person connected to Chrono Life, and as you may imagine, it's the protagonist. Our boy appears in a kind of virtual room, where a strange voice mentions a weird name, ST-389. The voice says that was the name of the planet the protagonist just destroyed. The mysterious man says that place was his mother's favorite. The boy asks who he is. The voice replies that he is God. After hearing the response, the protagonist doesn't believe it and finds it amusing. Then he asks if the girl who betrayed him is there by any chance. God responds that it's just the two of them in that place. He shouldn't be surprised by that since the protagonist killed everyone. It should be common sense. No one could survive an explosion like that. After hearing this, the boy bursts into laughter. Then he says he's very happy to have gotten his revenge. He even tries to talk to Eurus, however. God says the dragon isn't there either. The curious protagonist begins to ask what that existence was, since the current number of people in that room is only one player. However, the being calling itself God cannot answer that question because apparently someone is interfering in that place. So he bid farewell and said it was a great conversation. Finally, the boy is also disconnected from the game. The boy wakes up angry because God didn't answer his question. An instant later, an old blonde man appears and walks up to our protagonist. Here we finally find out his name. He's called Lee Jiwoo and he's 21 years old. Lee has been playing Chrono Life for the last 3 months. The old man even mentions the boy's legendary weapon, the overpowering Supreme Stick. The young man is surprised and asks who he is. The old man replies that he's the one who's going to steal Jiwoo's stick. Again, the boy's story is introduced. He says he's just a regular college student who likes to play Chrono Life. He was just a beginner player, but luckily he got a strong weapon. That's when his life in Chrono Life changed. Currently, the boy is in a restaurant with the old man, and after a brief conversation, it is revealed that this weird old man is actually the president of the game. His name is Choi Dio-bake. Lee didn't quite understand why the president went after him with some suspicious-looking men who seemed more like gangsters, but in fact, they were just company workers. Choi explains that he came after him to get the plus 99 Supreme Stick because according to him, this is a bugged item. It shouldn't be possible to upgrade a weapon so much. As mentioned before, after upgrading a weapon 10 times, the chance of upgrading again drops to 3%. So the protagonist's stick will now be under President Choi's care. Changing the scene, in the frontline city of Chrono Life, a group of adventurers faces a monster. When the creature tries to attack, a girl launches a fire missile that hits it precisely. Next, the protagonist's wife appears. A pink-haired girl appears to strike the monster with a punch to the neck, but the girl simply faints after attacking. Lee is nearby watching the situation, wondering whether to help them or not. The dwarf dragon is curious and asks what the boy is going to do. At this point, we see that the protagonist still has the stick, because the game president didn't want to take his weapon. Who was interested in it was the company's executive sector. Choi says that, in fact, the boy's item isn't bugged, so the protagonist can keep the stick and do whatever he wants with it. The old man won't interfere. Back to Chrono Life, our boy continues to ponder what to do. Meanwhile, the name of the pink-haired girl is mentioned. Her name is Tuka, and she's apparently having trouble with her own team because she broke the basic attack formation, so she ends up being heavily criticized by her teammate. He says she has no brains. I don't know. What she lacks in brains she makes up for in beauty. Seems fair. The young man continues to just observe everything while recalling Choi's teachings. The old man says that Chrono Life is a good game, a very diverse fantasy world. If possible, he would like the protagonist to avoid destroying it. It seems to be a difficult task for our boy Lee. Returning to the game, the girl continues to be humiliated by her teammate, and she is abandoned by the team. The boy, seeing that situation, says that adventure or even romance don't exist in this game. All that prevails here is the law of the jungle, so the protagonist will enjoy the game, but his way, so he unleashes a giant attack towards the group that just abandoned the girl. But suddenly, the young man's attention is redirected to the girl. That's because she starts screaming, saying that the game is really bad, and that her old group mates don't have an eye for things, especially since they can't recognize how good her equipment is. Our boy Lee, seeing this whole situation, starts to remember his past when he was humiliated. Kainen continues to scream, saying she won't join any hunting group, and from that day on, she would hunt alone. However, a wave of monsters appears in front of her. The girl was stunned. All she could do was close her eyes. There are several of them. All seem to be very hungry. Then they charge at her. When she thinks all is lost, a mysterious man, dressed in a cloak, only in his underwear and with a stick in hand, appears in front of her. With one attack, our hero, underwear with the blessed stick, simply finishes off all the enemies. The girl, who was trembling with fear, decides to open her eyes. What does she see? Looking at the sky, the spacing of the clouds caused by the protagonist's attack is evident. So our boy begins to have philosophical thoughts about solidarity and pity, imagining that maybe he didn't help her for those reasons. Probably he did it because he thought it would be fun. Anyway, the result was a bit complicated and chaotic. This is just the beginning of this story. The girl seems all melted for the protagonist. Yeah, my friends, could my prediction be correct? And this is the future Mrs. Stick. Leader isn't dumb. He doesn't waste time. Soon he asks if the girl doesn't want to form a group with him. It seems that the true story of the protagonist begins here. However, the girl refuses, and even tells him to go to that place. She says she doesn't hunt with noobs. Well, it seems like this is a terrible start. Then we change scenes, this time to real life where people were discussing the events of Chrono Life. Remember the feats of the protagonist? So it was the first murder of 800,000 people, followed by a murder of 3 million people. No one knew the identity of who did that. Some call him the battle god, others say he's just a hacker with a bugged item, which is a pretty reasonable opinion. People say it's not a number that can be defeated with attributes and control. Many even want the protagonist to be expelled from the game. So people were eagerly awaiting Chrono Life's response, until the company spoke up, but it wasn't the announcement people wanted. In the message, it said that our protagonist is just a regular user, and that he wouldn't be punished for anything. After all, he didn't break any game rules. So that's how part of Lee's problem ended. However, people were still discussing the Chrono Life server crash. They say the service only crashed because someone killed thousands of people at once. They all recognize our boy for this. Changing scenes once again, the boy appears walking behind Kayan, the pink-haired girl, who angrily questions why he's following her. Lee replies that they should form a hunting group, but she said she doesn't agree with that. The girl doesn't want to create a group with someone like him, especially since it would be very indecent, since the boy walks around only in his underwear, and on top of that, with his wood out. The boy says she should be grateful because he saved her after all. Urus mentions that he witnessed what happened, and that her eyes were closed when he defeated everyone with one blow. So the protagonist wonders if she doesn't know how strong the power of the Supreme Stick is. With that, a brilliant idea comes to his mind. Our boy intends to hide his own power, so he runs after the girl, asking them to form a team because he's new to the game, starts begging and even calls her master. The girl is amazed by this, especially since she was recently humiliated, and now they're calling her master. It seems like her confidence has risen significantly. Our boy is excited too. Pretending to be weak was what he wanted at first. The girl was so touched that she wasted no time and invited him to form a group, saying she'll only help once. They head to the entrance of a dungeon to defeat some rabbit bears. I wouldn't sleep with one of those even if it were plush. Master Kayan starts doing some flips and some fancy attacks. She seems quite strong, but is she worthy of the briefs? After defeating some rabbits, she strikes a pose and says the rest can come at them. The protagonist just watches. No matter if the monster's level is low, it'll be dangerous if she gets surrounded by them. Urus says he doesn't need to worry because his master has excellent gear. The dwarf dragon says her weapon alone costs 10 million gold. The protagonist was impressed because that's equivalent to 10 million won in real life. Urus continues saying that all her equipment is superb, and that altogether it must be worth 100 million gold. The protagonist wonders why she has such equipment when her level is low. Eurus replies that it's obvious Kayan definitely bought that equipment using some real-life monetary resource. The boy is shocked by this. It doesn't make sense to spend so much money on a game like that. The girl then approaches the protagonist, asking why he's standing still while she's doing everything alone. Indignant, she tells her underwear-clad pupil to beat the monsters. As the master speaks, a rabbit bear appears behind her to grab a bite, but unlucky for him, Super Brief Guy was nearby. The girl quickly turns around and asks why he's swinging at nothing. The young man puts his convictions to the test since it's very difficult to hide so much power. The girl receives a message and says she has to leave for a while. The protagonist is indignant that she's leaving. A moment later, the doubt resurfaces about how the girl has so much money to spend on games. The dwarf dragon theorizes that maybe she was born into a wealthy family. In the real world, we see Kayan waking up after disconnecting, promptly getting up and putting on her glasses. The work focuses on her so we can admire her beauty up close. Kayan begins to remember the moments she spent with the protagonist and smiles. The girl enjoys this moment until someone opens the door. It's a woman who seems quite irritated. She asks if Kayan forgot about work. The girl replies that she already logged out of the game. But the argument continues and the woman says she's addicted to games. Then she asks the girl to hurry up and sit down. The woman asks if she was playing Chrono Life with glasses. She says it's to take the glasses off when using the helmet so as not to leave marks on the nose. And after being reprimanded, the girl argues defensively, saying she gets anxiety attacks if she doesn't wear glasses. The nose mark wouldn't be a problem because her sister is a good makeup artist. It seems that this woman is actually her sister. After this situation, the girl goes to do her makeup. She lets down her hair and prepares to literally put on a show. In the real world, the girl is a K-pop singer. It's said that she's an extremely popular idol. Apparently, her real name is Han Sarang, the best singer and songwriter of the moment, being at the top for 13 consecutive weeks in terms of audience. Only Your Love, Your First Love, her hobby that the public doesn't know about are online games. Changing the scene, we return to the game where the Brief Guy starts practicing a bit to shake off the rust from his bones, or rather to turn the monsters into dust. His goal is to train his strength control to effectively hide his power. Suddenly, we're shown the being calling himself God watching the protagonist's training. He says it's an interesting workout and even mentions his mother. Who could this crazy person's mother be? Han Sarang is 18 years old. She's a high school student and entered the music industry at a very young age. Previously, she was unpopular for a while. However, she stabilized herself as the best singer of the moment. We can see Han in an interview. The interviewer asks how she manages to write such moving poetry like her first song, The Little Mermaid's Story. The girl says it's a product of her imagination since she likes to read poetry and fairy tales. Based on this, the interviewer asks if that's what inspired the name of her first song. Han is embarrassed, saying it's a pretty childish hobby. That was enough to make the entire audience blush. Even the interviewer couldn't resist. We find out through her sister that Han's inspiration is actually her hobby of playing video games and not reading poetry or fairy tales. This is the truth that the public doesn't know. Continuing with the interview, it is said that Kayan is an actress and played the role of a rude girl. The girl quickly affirms that this role does not reflect her personality. She says she has never cursed even once since she was born. But the Kukwina knows very well that this is not quite true. Then we are taken back to the game where Han and the boy meet. They greet each other very friendly. After being kicked and punched, the protagonist is advised by the dragon to get rid of the girl for being a rude person. The boy doesn't react to insults or punches. He wanted to continue pretending to be weak, so he ends up obeying all the orders of his new master. After being completely humiliated, Kukwina realizes that his goal has been achieved. He is officially a failure again. The girl asks if her student has been training a lot while she was away, and the boy replies that the training required a lot of patience. Controlling the force is not easy at all. At this moment, it becomes clear that it will be a very long journey. Kayan remembers that she doesn't even know the boy's name. He even tries to answer, but why know his name if she can simply call him Kukwina? The two remain chatting in a relaxed way, to the point of not noticing that there are people following them. Apparently, the pursuers are after Kayan to take revenge. A member of the group asks what they will do now that they have located the girl. The leader orders to call all the guild members to the dungeon. Probably what they want is to set up an ambush. The protagonist and his master meet a wild rabbit bear. But this time, Kayan tells our boy Lee to take care of the situation. Trembling with fear and with a face of pure enthusiasm, he approaches the obstacle, draws his legendary stick, and delivers a single touch to the monster's fur. The fellow rabbit bear just grazed the tip of the stick, but the pressure was so great that it started spitting strawberry juice from its mouth. The boy is happy to have been able to control a little of the force. The master feels proud of him for defeating the rabbit in a single blow. But this happiness doesn't last long because an enemy surprise attack appears. The protagonist's girl pulls him back and deflects the sword that was coming towards them. Look at the flexibility of the girl. The attack rebounds on the one who launched it and injures the enemy a bit. With a smile on his face, he announces his arrival to give his greetings. The girl asks who that man is, and suddenly the whole gang appears. It is revealed that this man is a guild leader of Hallis and Mr. Kim. The girl is surprised. The old man orders his accomplices to attack. Kayan tells our protagonist to leave because it's dangerous. She assumes a battle position and already knocks the first one down with a kick. Using his head as a trampoline, the girl jumps and activates what seems to be a special ability, Dragon Kick. The protagonist is always a faithful spectator, wondering why all this is happening. Meanwhile, our master defeats some extras, but they were just a distraction. A short-haired elf joins the battlefield and activates a theft ability that takes some equipment from our master. The boy is impressed by this. Eurus says that the power to steal equipment belongs to the thief class, but it shouldn't be so strong. The boy Lee becomes unconcerned for a moment until he remembers that if the elf has the ability to steal, she could take his staff. So the boy starts running in fear. Who would have thought, right? The enemies spot the protagonist running. The old man seems uninterested. For him, it's evident that it's just a poor beginner, but the elf is somewhat sadistic. She claims that stealing from those who have nothing is more enjoyable. Thus, the chase begins for the boy. She simply couldn't contain herself, desiring to take our boy Lee's legendary staff. The little guy panics, facing danger. He tries to react by attacking before being robbed. But it was too late because his wood was already in the hands of the elf. Now that she had lost the staff, it was time to lose the cape too. The only thing she didn't intend to steal was the underwear, our protagonist's trademark. Everything else she's going to grab. Her party ends when Eurus awakens. It only took a moment to release the staff from the little guy's underpants. The dragon doesn't accept anyone but the boy wielding it. That's exclusivity. After all this time, we finally see a trace of humanity from Boy Lee. After hearing Eurus, he pets his head. The dragon gets all embarrassed. What a beautiful friendship. Meanwhile, the elf arrives on the ground, trembling with fear. She simply can't understand the indescribable situation she just went through. A ghost? No, it was too real to be that. Kim starts questioning the mercenary. After all, the mission should be completed. The thief composes herself and says she hasn't forgotten their deal. Our mistress enters the scene again. The girl tries to land a surprise blow but fails. Kayan demands her equipment back. Unfortunately, she was after the wrong target, since Kim was the one with her gloves. Seeing this, the girl explodes in rage. She threatens to kill everyone there until Lee intervenes using his secret technique, hit without killing, to knock down his mistress. The elf is confused why he attacked her ally. Little does she know that, in fact, the protagonist only knocked out his mistress, to be able to hack everyone there for dinner. Then he starts revealing his true power. First, he takes out the extras next to the elf, then goes straight for the main course. Filled with anger, the boy approaches her in the blink of an eye. Attacking with his skill hit without killing, he quickly takes her down. The boy says he didn't like being afraid because of her. That said, he starts hitting her again. What's this? The protagonist doesn't even spare the women. He must believe in gender equality. Changing the scene, we see a very interesting scene of the protagonist's future wife lying on the grass, unconscious, which unfortunately doesn't last long. The boy asks if she's awake yet. The girl can only bombard the protagonist with questions, asking about the enemy's situation. Our boy doesn't like to boast, so he said they left. The girl starts asking how she passed out, and he simply decides to return the fists that were stolen, avoiding the question. Instead, the little guy starts questioning the mistress about the Halcyon Guild. His goal was to find out as much as possible about them. Cannon seems angry for a moment, but then she blushes and gives a smile as if she's satisfied. I don't know, I believe the marriage will happen before the end of the year. If his little stick is causing trouble now, wait until it grows into a formed tree. It won't fit inside the underwear. Well, in the end, the girl says she'll tell him everything. Kayan asks if our boy has heard of the term pay to win. In short, you buy items in the game with money, aiming to become stronger. She finishes by saying that Halcyon Guild players spend a lot to buy equipment in the game. The mistress also mentions that she bought that pair of fists at an auction by chance. One day, the guild started hunting her with the aim of stealing that equipment. But of course, they were no match for the little guy's wife. The girl asks how the protagonist managed to retrieve the fists, even asking if he stole them back. The little guy says they just left the item there, maybe they forgot. Kayan is in doubt but accepts it. She says that Mr. Kim is a complete lunatic and will probably try to steal again. The protagonist finds it strange. Why do they want such equipment so badly? The girl calmly replies that it's because that fist is worth 10 million gold. But the protagonist points out that those old folks spend billions in the game. Such obsession with an item worth 10 million doesn't make sense. Surely it's not just that. Now in the guild hideout, we're shown Mr. Kim on his knees before a mysterious man, begging for another chance to complete the mission. The man says he's useless, and there's no time to waste. It's better to pass this mission to the 4 celestial kings. Then 3 more men enter the room. They discuss Kim's failure. The king with an elfish appearance even says he should have been expelled. Another man wearing a blue cloak says that hiring any mercenary for such a mission was a terrible strategy. Then the king with fox ears speaks up. He informs that he'll be in charge of retrieving the mistress's fist within the next 12 hours. Finally, we're introduced to the king of mules, who seems to be at the top of this hierarchy. The leader orders them to show what they're capable of. A moment later, they notice a boy standing in the middle of the room. Everyone stares at him for a moment. The boy says that everything they said is nonsense. The king asks who the boy is. The little guy just wanted to resolve it quickly. If those kings kept going after his mistress, it would be more difficult to hide the powers of the superior staff. The king then orders to eliminate the boy. All the other unknown kings comply with the order and advance on the protagonist. But as usual, one attack is enough to take down the elf and the one in the blue cloak. When the king with fox ears tries to attack, he's quickly brought down too. Outside the house, we see a girl walking while singing. And this is the girl who betrayed the protagonist at the beginning of the story. Is she immortal by any chance? As beautiful as she may be on the outside, she's ugly on the inside. Not that it's much of a problem, I mean it's better not to get involved with people like that. Continuing the fight, the king orders all guild members to attack at once. The protagonist calmly says that if they want to win, they'll need at least 3 million people. Our boy easily defeats all the enemies there. The king is impressed by this. Kim warns the mule leader that he needs to escape, or he'll be the next target. But the supposed king didn't seem very happy with it all. He simply can't understand all the members had good items and yet they were defeated. Even the 5 major guilds couldn't underestimate them. That's when the Mule King starts using his brain. Could this boy possibly be the legend himself, the little guy with the staff? Now, a bit of the enemy boss's history. His real name is Mr. Wang. He started playing games as a child, and they weren't as sophisticated as they are today. It was also harder to level up. Still, Wang really enjoyed playing, so much so that he became addicted to it. As he got older and had more responsibilities, he stopped playing. When he realized it, he was already 40 years old. Upon reaching this age, he decided he would start playing again. This would be a gift to himself after so much hard work. But soon he realized that things were no longer the same as his childhood days. His memories are shaken by the current situation. After the protagonist defeats each of Hallison's henchmen, only 2 people remain standing, or rather 1 standing and 1 kneeling. King Wang and Mr. Kim, who happen to be brothers. The boy says this is the end of pay to win, and it's about time they both get beaten too. Returning to Wang's memories, he says games have changed a lot. Before, it took some effort to get strong, but nowadays all you had to do was spend money in a game to get as strong as you wanted. So one day he meets Chrono Life, the most acclaimed by critics. Wang hopes to find a game that makes him feel like when he was a child. Again, we return to the present. At the moment, the protagonist is giving a beating to the Mule King. I'm suspecting that the little guy is a disciple of Saitama. He solves everything with just 1 blow from the supreme stick. Wang gets up and asks if the boy isn't the rumored legend, the one who defeated the union of the 5 largest guilds. Then he asks the boy, wondering how much he had to spend to get such power. Our little guy responds that he doesn't know what the Mule King is talking about, but yes, he admits he spent some money on the game. The king thinks the boy spent tens of billions, when in fact the protagonist says he only bought a beginner's package totaling 55,000 won. With this answer, Wang seems to have revived the feeling of his childhood and starts laughing. He says Chrono Life is a fun game. The girl who betrayed the protagonist appears behind him and agrees, saying it's a divine game. Extending her greetings to the Hallison Guild, the girl says it's been a while since they've seen each other and asks if everything is ready. The Mule King says preparations were going well, but that he wants nothing more to do with her. Now that he's broken the cooperation agreement, the girl decides to eliminate him and the party altogether, just like she did with the protagonist. Kim is devastated by his brother's death. The girl wonders if she should have asked why Wang broke the agreement, but as she was in a bad mood, shortly after it's Kim's turn to be killed. Then the girl resumes the appearance of the goddess of life. I must admit she's beautiful, too bad she's a traitor. She had so much potential to be the protagonist's wife. In fact, before the chapter ends, the girl mentions the captain of love, our boy's master. Will she go after Kian to fight for the protagonist's stick? Following the boy, a system message appears along with a counter. The experience for defeating the entire Hallison Guild is being calculated. Then a notification congratulates the protagonist for reaching level 999. He was fighting all this time without knowing his own level, which resulted in an absurd amount of attribute points. It's my friends, if a legendary stick was already unbalanced, now the protagonist is going to awaken the hacker instinct. Out of nowhere, a random boy appears in an interview. He says it would take decades to reach the game's maximum level even if he played all day for years. The system congratulates the protagonist. The boy is speechless. Eurus begins to speak, saying he's proud of our boy, who begins to remember all his adventures. After eliminating millions of players and destroying the planet, the result finally appears. Becoming the first person in the world to reach the highest level of the game, suddenly the boy is abducted, and then the scene cuts to our master, who is admiring the landscape, angrily imagining where the little guy got himself into. The boy asked her to wait until he returned, but a long time had passed. Then she remembers that Lee was nice to her before, so she decides to wait a little longer. Returning to the protagonist's abduction, he finds himself in an unknown location. A strange being appears and welcomes the little guy, saying he is an extraordinary person. That being introduces himself as the guide of Transcendence. The little blue one continues, saying he respects the boy for reaching the highest level of the game as a novice class. Eurus doesn't believe it. The protagonist explains that he never changed classes, but since the conditions were met, the boy's class change begins. The wand's soul enters the boy's body. Now he belongs to the secret class Novice Master. The class privilege triples the protagonist's attribute points. The dwarf dragon begins to explain how ridiculous that is, although the little underwear guy doesn't seem very impressed. He starts allocating all the points to just one stat. The dragon thinks it's a waste, but the young man says it's not a problem. After that, Eurus is sure the boy is crazy. At the Chrono Life company, a man informs Choi that a user has completed the game, so they walk to a room where they watch the progress of the boy with the legendary staff. The old man asks, why is he there? The employee informs that the problem isn't the boy's level, but the allocation of points into a single stat. Curious, Choi asks which stat he's leveling up, and when answered, he starts laughing. That boy is really enjoying the game. The company employee comments on how useless that stat was. Choi emphasizes that the company can't get involved in the player's choices and heads towards the exit of the room, saying he can't believe what the protagonist has done, and even adds that the worst and strongest character has just been created. Returning to the little underwear guy having to choose among some divine weapons that the guide wields, the protagonist says they're all cool, but he's already decided he wants all the weapons. The Smurf refuses. At this point, the boy asks if the guide will hand them over now or only after taking a beating. Everyone watching is impressed by the boy's madness. The class guy doesn't like that at all and launches an attack on the protagonist, who draws his legendary staff. It seems the blue baldy wants to take a beating. And when they were about to start exchanging blows, the result is, hold on, folks, a quick pause. Place your bets, who will win? The little underwear guy with the supreme staff or the blue baldy? Now that you've bet, let's continue the fight. The guide attacks our protagonist with an axe and hits him hard, but when he thinks he's won, the boy reappears saying the attack hurt quite a bit, maybe because it was from a god. Here we discover which stat the protagonist leveled up like an idiot. He invested all the points in physical health. This attribute makes him immune to some things, positively affecting his recovery. The reason it seems like a bad stat is that if you invest everything in a single attribute, he will be weak, unable to carry any equipment other than the staff, but the boy asserts that he only needs that. Then, as if that weren't enough, the little underwear guy awakens a hidden ability, Healing Factor. All damage the boy receives will be converted into healing. It gives him immunity to poisons, diseases, and paralysis. The protagonist seems very happy with this new ability. The Smurf decides to react and fires a laser beam at the young man, which hits precisely. Eurus becomes very worried, but the protagonist bursts into laughter. The boy begins to regenerate. As he recomposes himself, he receives some more attacks, but he doesn't seem worried at all. Now that the little underwear guy has finished playing, he orders the guide to hand over all the weapons. Then we start seeing through the enemy's perspective. The blue baldy warns that the protagonist's greed will one day consume him. That said, those were his last words. Also because the boy doesn't care about any of it. With just one strike from the Supreme Staff, the Transcendental Guide simply ceases to exist, and that entire place starts to disintegrate, forcing our boy to return to the world of Chrono Life. But with a twist, all the Transcendental weapons are with him now. They will always answer the little underwear guy's call, which makes him quite happy. Unlike his mistress, who is extremely irritated. She says that after waiting for so long, she won't let it pass, no matter the boy's excuse. He arrives all excited but receives a punch and several kicks as a welcome. The boy thought he would return soon, but some things delayed him. She's quite disappointed and says she'll log out of the game. The protagonist bids farewell. She gives an angry look, but soon calms down. The girl informs the protagonist that the next day at 7 p.m., she'll finish work and enter the game. With a cute face, she warns him not to be late again. After this situation, even the dwarf dragon caught the dating vibe. The boy also decides to leave the game because it's past midnight. Our boy wakes up in the real world feeling tired. On his way home, Lee passes by a restaurant, and as he was hungry, he considers going there, but he realizes he's broke. Tired of being poor, the boy thinks of something to make some extra income, maybe taking more shifts at his job, until a good idea pops into his head. Remembering that his master bought some expensive equipment with real money, he realizes he can sell in-game items. So the protagonist starts running with great enthusiasm. The world's #1 game, Chrono Life. All players recognize that there's a forbidden place in the game, the intersection between life and death, the Tomb of Mortals. It's the only adventure that no player has been able to complete. For an unknown reason, the place where Chrono Life's strongest boss resides was hidden, the Valley of the Dead. After this introduction, we see that the protagonist is at Eurus' house. Lee, with a mercenary look, says he's under the care of the dwarf dragon. The boy became so obsessed with revenge that he forgot to pick up items from the Valley of Death. Then several monsters begin to appear. The boy says that from that moment on was the end of his miserable life because he was going to get rich in an instant. The story goes on showing some monsters from the valley, Turbid of Despair, Lapis of the Abyss, and finally Trizon of the Dawn. These three are the strongest in Eurus' army. However, with just 2 attacks from the superior wand, all creatures in the valley were eliminated, and thousands of valuable items began to rain down from the sky. Eurus says that the protagonist ended it in an instant and did a good job. But our little underwear guy says it's just begun. He expects the monsters to respawn. The dwarf dragon is sad about the situation. After all, that was his army. Unfortunately, the protagonist spares no one. As it's the first time the boy is selling items, he imagines he should farm only 100 times. In the real world, we're taken to a lecture at Harvard, where they say Bill Gates is a very rich man, and even if he found $100 on the ground, he wouldn't pick it up since he earns approximately $150 per second. It would be a waste of time to spend more than that to bend down and pick up the money. In other words, he'd be losing $200 if he did so. However, in the protagonist's case, it takes about 1 hour to accumulate 100 spawns, which in total generates the sum of approximately 15 billion golden items. According to the lecture, Bill Gates earns 500 million won per hour. The protagonist has exceeded the income rate of the richest man in the world. Back in the real world, we see the boy leaving the Gucci store. We also see him in a Lamborghini, people looking impressed, including lots of girls. It seems the boy has not only beaten the game, but also real life. For fun, he deliberately crashes into a truck just to switch cars. After that, there's a change of scenery. The old Choi is receiving a report from an employee. The employee says that recently items worth approximately 15 billion won have been released on the market, and because of this, the game's progression has increased by approximately 2 years. The employee wonders if he should flee. Choi says he can hear his thoughts, then he questions if there's any way to block transactions so that items aren't sold. But unfortunately, this is impossible. Faced with this, the president calls the protagonist. The boy says he's busy spending money, flaunting so much that he even asks the old man if he'd love a gift. The president isn't very happy about it and starts cursing the boy, who simply hangs up. Man, this boy is really something, honestly. He didn't have a penny to his name before, now the only concern is how to spend so much money. Soon the protagonist remembers the most important thing, buying a super luxurious house. But he's forgetting something. When he changes underwear, he's been wearing the same one since the beginning of the story. After the move, the young man decides to socialize with the neighbors, so he bakes a cake. He goes to a nearby house and knocks on the door. The boy says he just moved in and brought a rice cake. The person asks the protagonist to wait a moment, then opens the door, and guess who it is? Our dear master, who even appears to be in a school uniform. The two stare at each other for a while. Suddenly, the scene cuts and we're taken back to Chrono Life. In the Valley of the Dead, a figure resembling a demon appears. Several monsters try to attack this demon. The figure says they're a bunch of idiots. They can't even recognize their own master. After absorbing all the monsters there, the demon's identity is revealed. He is Eurus's lost head. The sole purpose of eliminating all humans. His name is Uriken. We interchange of scenery. The idol of the music industry, Han Sarang, whose code name is Love in Chrono Life. She meets Lee for the first time in real life. Compared to the game, she's considerably kinder. The girl thanks him and says she'll eat everything. The protagonist doesn't recognize her as the master, but as Han Sarang, the famous singer. Apparently, it must be impossible for them to recognize each other, also because they're quite different in the game and in real life. The girl enters the house and meets her sister. For a moment, Han feels like she's seen her new neighbor before, but she doesn't recognize him. A boy like that is unforgettable. When she sees him, she'll recognize him right away. The sister advises that Han should change because she was still in her school uniform and the filming would start soon. The girl gets angry and says she just arrived, but soon remembers the commitment she has with the protagonist and goes to change. The sister realizes that the girl found someone special in the game. She wonders who stole her little sister's heart. It's official now, folks. If our boy's own sister-in-law said so, then who are we to disagree, right? The boy returns to the item farming location, but realizes that all the monsters in the place have disappeared. He asks the dwarf dragon if his subordinates happen to run away. Eurus replies that this is impossible because the monsters are programmed to act in a specific way. It's as if they simply vanished. The boy says it doesn't matter. They'll just hunt elsewhere. Eurus reminds the little underwear guy that he's supposed to meet the master at 7 p.m. The disappointed protagonist leaves due to the disappearance of the monsters. The dwarf dragon says he can sense a familiar yet threatening spirit in the valley. Suddenly, we see a giant serpent in the snow. Her name is Elrose. Alexandra being against Hurricane. She's fighting against Uriken, who easily defeats her. He then absorbs her. The demon says it's not enough. There's still a long way to go. Suddenly, the goddess of life appears. She's impressed by how far Uriken has come. The girl said it was expected since he eats a lot. Suddenly, she is attacked by the demon. Eurus's second head believes the girl is delicious. Therefore, he tries to absorb her as well, but fails. The girl tells him not to scare her like that. Uriken, confused, asks if it's a hallucination, being sure he hit her. The goddess says it doesn't matter. The scaly one clarifies that he probably couldn't eat her, and adds that they were of a similar nature. The girl points to a village and states that there's plenty of food for him there. The second head of Eurus gets excited and starts laughing, commenting that his only purpose is to destroy humanity. He quickly heads to the city and begins absorbing the population. All the players in the area became food. A place where beginners and veterans worked, new players and even experienced ones were no match for that monster. Back at Chrono Life Company, the employee will report more problems to the president. The employee says the company is receiving several complaints from users. The reason for dissatisfaction is that players' characters were deleted when absorbed by Ureken. It seems that Eurus's second head has become a kind of virus that erases characters. Chrono Life is bombarded with several criticisms because of this. The president, however, doesn't seem to be worried about it at all. In fact, he already knew about the existence of Ureken. Choi even orders to monitor only 2 characters. One is Ureken, and the other is Luna, the famous traitor. Back in the game, we see a chaotic scene. The Scaly One remains standing in the middle of a city in flames. The goddess of life also appears. She didn't imagine that Eurus's second head would eat the entire city. The Scaly One says it's not enough and asks where he could find more food. The girl says the next meal would be the best of all. We are taken to the master, who eagerly awaits the little underwear guy. It seems the boy is late again. He won't live to tell the tale. Noticing someone's presence, she turns around already excited, thinking it was the boy, but who was there was Ureken. We're revealed that the monster had already reached the highest level of the game. Will there finally be an opponent worthy of the protagonist? Back to the city, we follow the former king of Castle Artem. It is said that he had an empire but lost everything, since he was defeated along with the Union by the protagonist. Saying that all the guilds were in his hands, he couldn't simply accept giving up everything. Suddenly, there is an explosion and a huge monster emerges from it. That day, the former king of Castle Artem witnessed hundreds of players being deleted. Wondering what that was, he opens the bulletin board and sees that all the absorbed characters were being deleted. The only person to notice the former king's presence was the goddess, who said nothing. Then she and Ureken move towards their next prey. The failed one from Castle Artem even laughs nervously. The scene changes again. Now we follow the protagonist's wife, who encounters 2 powerful enemies. The goddess of life says it's a pleasure to meet the captain of love whom she had heard of. The master innocently asks if that girl knows the little underwear guy, since the boy is the only person who knows that name. She says she almost hit Eurus's second head because it scared her. The goddess of life continues. She says that apparently the love captain and the protagonist are close. Kayan says that actually she was only interested in playing with him, even though she doesn't like him. The goddess of life has a gloomy expression on her face and a mischievous laugh. She remembers what happened before eliminating Juan, the king of mules. Concluding the girl's reasoning, she calls the protagonist master annoying. After that, Kayan is attacked by Ureken, while the goddess simply watches. The Scaly One says that meal was delicious. The girl says it's obvious since Kayan's a piece of a god. Eurus's second head asks what that means, but the goddess refuses to say because it's not important. Then she invites him to go after more delicious meals. However, their plan is interrupted because our boy finally arrived. With a serious face, he faces the enemies. The goddess asks how the boy has been. The protagonist tells her to shut up and take her foot off Kayan's clothes. Luna says she stepped on the remnants of his master by mistake. The little underwear guy warns that he's going to start beating up the Scaly One. He attacks with his stick, but unfortunately, it wasn't enough to defeat Ureken, who counterattacks. The protagonist wonders what kind of creature survived after being hit by the stick. The monster asks what there is to be surprised about since he can simply dodge that kind of attack. Then the boy says it's just about attacking with more force. Eurus's second head thinks it's just a bluff, asking if the previous attack wasn't with full force. The protagonist says all the blows they've seen so far were normal attacks. Suddenly, he activates a unique ability of the Novice Master class, Swordsman Spirit. It's the first technique of the stick that our boy will use. It's best for the Scaly One to give it his all to dodge. Then the protagonist activates the Continuous Cut ability, which allows him to attack without stopping. It's such a powerful ability that it can reach and destroy a planet. The story continues with the former king of Arden Castle going live, seeking popularity. He believes tarnishing the company's name is the best way to quickly gain engagement, so he makes several criticisms of the game. We return to the protagonist's fight against Ureken. The boy asks where that monster came from. The Scaly One reveals his identity, admitting to being Eurus's second head. The dragon says he found Ureken's presence very familiar but thought it was just his imagination. Eurus warns the boy to be careful, since he might be the reason for the disappearance of the monsters in the valley. The dragon concludes by saying that his master also died earlier and her character was deleted. The Scaly One gets tired of just watching and tries to attack the protagonist, who defends himself calmly. Now that he was sure that Kayan's character was really deleted, he's not going to make it easy for the enemy. The failure of Artem Castle is approaching the scene of the fight. Meanwhile, the little underwear guy beats up the Scaly One. He uses a version of the continuous attack to beat the monster without eliminating it. The former leader of the Union arrives at the scene of the fight and fills with anger at seeing the man who took everything from him standing there. Then he draws his bow and prepares to attack. But he is interrupted by a message. Apparently, people are recovering their game characters, consequently, Ureken is losing levels continuously. The boy asks what's wrong with the monster. He's become too slow. Hubris informs that the energy absorbed by the scaly one is returning to the original characters. A company employee reported that the player's data was not deleted but had been transferred to Uriken. The protagonist understands that if he defeats the scaly one, his master will also return. The monster gets extremely irritated and tries to attack the protagonist, but he simply doesn't stand a chance of winning. The viewers of the live recognize that the one fighting is the living legend, a blessed stick underwear guy. Many people are watching the live, including the boy's future wife. Upon seeing the live, she discovers that the boy was never weak and remembers the day they met. The fight unfolds with the scaly one on his knees. He was once at the highest level of the game. Now he's only at level 180 because he lost all the energy he had absorbed. He was ready to end the fight, but Uriken tries to react. He impales a tentacle into the boy to absorb his energy. A moment of sadness follows, but for a short time, as our little underwear guy's healing ability is activated, he begins to manifest inside Uriken. Very bizarre, can we say the boy was born again? Gurus asks if that manifestation is from the protagonist, and he answers yes. The boy comes face to face with a monster that devoured thousands of players. In the end, he ends up absorbing Uriken himself and returning to his original form thanks to the healing factor. With that, a new ability awakens called gluttony, which allows him to absorb the level and status of any target by eating it. The goddess of life asks if the fight is over. It wasn't what she expected, but it was fun after all. Since the girl called herself Uriken's mother, the protagonist says he ended up killing her son, but the girl says that, in fact, she wasn't really the scaly one's mother and points out that they are both the same age. Lee asks her how she knows his age, but she doesn't respond. The girl opens a rift and bids farewell to our boy. The president orders the team to solve this quickly by creating a reward event and also to continue monitoring Luna. The boy returns to the beginner's village being received as a hero. Striking a pose, he wonders if someone revealed his strength. Everyone recognizes the little underwear guy as someone good. Even a random elf tries to insult him but fails. The boy feels a little uncomfortable with so much attention and starts running away from the village. He runs so fast that he ends up bumping into a wall, but it's actually a golden statue of himself. It seems they went too far. It's weird, but not enough. Some even more dedicated fans appear. They dress exactly like the little underwear guy. This city is crazier than the protagonist. The king of mules was promoted to the leader of the fools because he spent a fortune just to honor the little underwear guy. Wang says he was the one who ordered to build that statue. Even the protagonist found this reaction exaggerated, considering it came from the craziest guy in the story, or maybe not. Honestly, it's hard to say. We are taken to the building where Han is withdrawn, thinking about how she didn't realize how strong the boy was even after he recovered her fists. She wonders why the protagonist deceived her. What's the reason behind him pretending to be weak? A sense of terror begins to form. Probably this girl suffered some trauma as a child. We return to the village where Lee walks casually until he meets his master. He says it's good to see a familiar face, but she doesn't seem happy to see him at all. The girl starts to express her emotions, questioning why he lied. The boy says he doesn't know how to lie and denies the accusation. Kyan then asks if he was the boy who brought rice cake for her. The protagonist takes a while to realize, still asking if she was perhaps Han Sarang. The girl confirms it was her. Revealing herself as a Chrono Life player caused several problems. Her sister started making judgments because of it. Han doesn't understand why things came to this. She never had any interest in hiding after all. Is playing video games a sin? It seems she's going through what many of us have gone through. Shave on being a gamer outside the internet. Her sister says she's just worried about Han's true personality being exposed. The girl says it was her own sister who forced her to hide the truth about her true personality and that she never wanted to lie to her own fans. She knocks on the door of the room and returns to virtual reality. Here we learn a little about Han's childhood. She has been singing since she was a child, considered a star very early on. She was happy about it. But something bad was happening off stage. The girl was being pressured by her own parents to do more and more shows, and obviously the motivation behind it was money. She had to fulfill various work contracts. Not even an adult could handle such a heavy workload. The little girl tried to deal with it, but at some point it became impossible. She reached her limit in one of her shows. The girl started vomiting in the middle of the stage, seeking refuge in her parents' grace. She got the evidence that all that mattered to them was how well the girl could perform on stage. Their only genuine interest was to quench their thirst for wealth. Therefore, she suffered an unimaginable pain that could never be forgotten. Back to the present, Han finds herself sitting amidst intrusive thoughts about the past. The protagonist tries to talk, but she's not interested. So the little underwear guy asks Urus if he could tell what the problem is. The wise dragon says Han is angry with him for hiding the truth about her power. He doesn't know exactly what to do, but soon apologizes for deceiving her from the start. The girl asks if he thinks things can be resolved so simply. The protagonist tries to give an explanation but is interrupted by a giant bird that kidnaps the girl. A man is sitting beneath the bird. It's worth noting the apparent seam he has on his neck. To challenge the protagonist, this guy must have lost his head. The guy notices that Han has lost consciousness and says that wasn't his intention. Kukwana asks who he is. The guy simply apologizes and says that some people want to meet that girl. Lee quickly loses patience and uses his stick to attack. The Stitch One uses an ability that reflects the protagonist's blow, even injuring him, but he regenerates quickly. The dwarf dragon tells that this is no ordinary human. His name is Habak, the god of water. One more for the protagonist to beat up. The girl remains unconscious in Habak's grasp. The guy says the protagonist is strong but not worthy of having a piece of God. Already in the god of water's hideout, Han regains consciousness. The girl is completely lost because she doesn't understand the situation. Habak tries to reassure the girl. He says some people want to meet her. Han continues not to understand until she sees the people in the room, her father and mother, the people who scorned her after she collapsed in front of thousands of people. After suffering public humiliation, the girl decided to give up her own career, but her parents were not willing to accept that. So they forced her to continue working for years until their income ran out. At this point, her parents had surpassed any common sense. They tried to sell their own daughter. Han was face to face with two monsters, but very different from the type found in games because these were real. The little girl managed to escape and sought help from the police, thus finally freeing herself from the prison she had been in for so long. However, the damage was significant. The girl was mentally broken. After that, she could only stay indoors. Over time, her vision deteriorated from spending long periods playing on the computer, all due to the memory of those days. The girl starts to tremble. She asks how they could be in front of her. There was a restraining order against them, but her parents replied that it was just a game. They couldn't stop them from finding her there. They conclude by saying they only found the girl because of newspaper articles that talked about her playing Chrono Life. The Stitch One leaves, then they continue talking alone. Han's mother starts talking about how much the girl has grown. Unfortunately, she couldn't witness her growth because the world is a cruel place that separates children from their parents. Her mother says she's very sorry for what happened in the past. They'd wanted to apologize for a long time. We know that this girl has never been shown affection, and it's really a shame. To fill a void like that, only the protagonist can. The scene cuts, showing Habak walking leisurely around the hideout with his beautiful bird resting on the grass. The two remain calm until they notice the presence of a man. Kukwinha shows up. The Stitch theorizes that the boy only got there because he was guided by Euros, but Lee cuts the conversation short, telling Habak to shut up. All the protagonist really wanted was to get his dose of revenge for what happened some time ago. Even if he ended up losing the battle, they should fight again. Fulfilling the boy's wish, the enemy with a snap of his fingers commands his chicken to attack. The situation unfolds with Kukwinha's outrage. How could a bird be so arrogant, daring to challenge a primate? Something surprising happens. The bird starts multiplying and thinking it might be a vision problem. The boy tries to regain his senses, but when he realizes it wasn't just a few chickens, there were now thousands of them. Habak used an ability called photocopy, and as the battle continues, the monsters fly toward the protagonist, who decides to make a chicken roast at the last minute. After all, there were several coming straight at him, and such an opportunity doesn't come every day. Unfortunately, the attack wasn't enough to destroy the enemies, and both Kukwinha and Euros were amazed at that power. The wise dwarf dragon, always granting information, explains the enemy's power. He owns a very overpowered item called the mirror, whose power is known as the 8 visions. Euros comments that this was the 4th variation of Habak's mirror, and that each of the item's abilities has an individual effect. For example, when the Stitch returned the protagonist's attack, he used the first vision, which allows reflecting any physical or magical attack. Kukwinha begins to complain about the existence of an unbalanced item like that, but he is the holder of the most overpowered weapon in the entire world and is complaining. The dwarf dragon finds this absurd, but continues to say it doesn't matter because the company never intended to balance the game in the first place. This wasn't an ordinary user, it was a monster that needed to be defeated. Dissatisfied with the situation, the boy keeps complaining. Who had the brilliant idea of creating a boss with a human form who could move freely? Unexpectedly, a surprise attack is launched and the boy is hit from behind. In a brief moment, the chickens prepare fireballs and launch them toward Kukwinha. It seems the tables have turned. Before it was Lee who wanted to cook something, but now he would be roasted and devoured. At least that seemed to be the enemy's expectation, but the boy remains alive amid the flames. Saying he got a scare, Lee activates his talent called Continuous Slash, which quickly defeats all the birds. But Habak says it doesn't matter how many times they are eliminated. He can always make more copies with his ability. Kukwinha asks if that's for real. Maybe he should just destroy the mirror. The Stitched looks with hostility while the protagonist activates his special move once again, which destroys the birds again. Repeating these attacks thousands of times while the enemies reappear through the 4th vision ability. Until Habak notices something strange, the mirror is starting to crack. The boy notices the same and goes straight to the Stitch to taunt him, calling him weak. Habak says that the boy is actually too strong. There was no way to predict such absurd power. The boy was bothered by the enemy's smile. An expression from an adversary reminded him of the girl who betrayed him in the past. Concluding, he demands Habak tell him why he kidnapped Han and what the connection is with the peace of God. Of course, the enemy refuses to give away such information so easily, questioning whether he should or not answer these questions, which irritates our boy a lot. The Stitch says that the mirror is broken, but it's possible to use it one more time. Then a clone of the protagonist appears. At first, the boy imagines it to be a bird, but he quickly identifies what's in front of him and is shocked because now his biggest enemy is himself. The photocopy mimics the target in all aspects. The only noticeable change is the appearance. As it's a mirror, everything is reversed. The mirror copy uses continuous slash to attack. The move hits right in the face, and besides killing him, it also removes our boy's charm. After getting hit with his own technique, the protagonist loses all his life. Observing the damage caused by cloning the boy, Habek thought that if he had known about this from the beginning, he would have just copied the boy thousands of times. Eurus asks him what his purpose is, and the young man cheerfully talks to the dwarf dragon, apologizing for not greeting him earlier as he was busy. By the way, Eurus looked much cuter than before. The dragon tells him to cut the nonsense and answer the question. What's the intent behind fighting Kukwina? Then Eurus wonders if that person could be involved. The true desire of Habek is revealed when he asks for permission to pinch the dwarf dragon's cheeks at least once. Suddenly, some kind of goo appears between them. What is that? You probably already know it's our dear Kukwina. The man had evaporated just a few minutes ago, but is now reconstructing himself thanks to his absurdly broken regeneration ability. Although this form is a bit strange and scary at first, even the villain is terrified to see the boy in this state. The protagonist focuses on his greatest enemy, the fake Kukwina. Eurus declares that in that condition, the clone seemed more real. The copy tries to attack the boy with a downward strike ability, but it's nullified by the opposing technique, an upward strike. Amid the massive impact, the two clash head-on to see which stick will prevail. As they use their abilities, the destruction caused around them is immense, yet they remain in a frantic exchange of blows, until they both land a strike to each other's head. Habak thinks the fight has ended in mutual destruction, but then their healing factor kicks in. These guys are like ghosts. The Stitch wonders if they can only recover like that. After they recover, the two resume their battle, while Eurus continues to ask questions about Habak's intentions. Responding to the dwarf dragon, he says that Eurus should pay more attention to others. Not even that person can act carelessly against the dwarf dragon, since he is, or was, the most powerful boss in the game. Now the Stitch is the one asking questions. Why suddenly did that person and Eurus, who never cared about anything in this world, suddenly get involved? And most importantly, he asks why the dwarf dragon is accompanying the protagonist. Eurus replies that he should already know the reason. The young man then clarifies that he has no interest in the boy, as goal is the peace of God. The lingering question is whether that divine fragment was Han Sarang herself. Habak tells Eurus not to be stupid. Of course, a human wouldn't be that significant. In fact, she's just the owner of the item. We then return to the hideout where a family gathering or something similar is taking place. Han's mother apologizes once again and asks if the girl can forgive her. Han seems uncomfortable, and a moment later, the girl's mother grabs her by the arm and with a strange smile, asks where the gloves of silence are. It's revealed in the conversation between Eurus and Habak that this item is the peace of God. The items in Chrono Life were divided into categories. First, the weakest items of normal grade. Second, the rare classification. Third, unique equipment. And finally, the Newman rank, which is where the divine fragment belongs. The Stitch concludes by saying that he had heard of the Transcendent rank, but had never seen it in person. Eurus recalls having seen several with the protagonist. Ultimately, regardless of strength or rarity, the peace of God is different, even though the Transcendent class is also unique, especially for the gods. We're then shown Luna, the girl who betrayed our young protagonist. This girl seems like she'll never die. If she keeps messing around, she'll end up as God Puree. She's shocked that Habak has revealed so much information. What kind of man can't keep quiet? Speaking of which, that god who appeared when the world was destroyed is with Luna. He claims the girl has been collecting various divine fragments for a long time. The goddess mentions that, as she suspected, that man knew about it all this time. The blonde man asks if, for some reason, the girl believed Uriken would be able to absorb the peace of God. Answering the question, she admits that she got a bit nervous, as the outcome was a bit different than expected. The scene shifts back to the battle between the fake Kukwinha and the original boy with the blessed stick. In a deadlock, our boy ends up losing and is quickly struck. Eurus becomes agitated about this. Habak states that even though the two have the same status, there's one decisive and fatal difference: the gap between a user and a bot. Unlike the protagonist, the clone doesn't make any mistakes due to fatigue or anything similar. This is how the outcome of this fight will change. The dragon flies over to Lee while Habak simply watches. We see Lee completely beaten, kneeling on the ground with a fatal wound. Eurus rushes over, shouting the boy's name. The healing factor kicks in, and the protagonist surprisingly shows ecstasy. It seems like he's having a lot of fun. Both the dwarf dragon and Habak are taken aback. Kupenha reveals his true feelings, showing himself to be a full-fledged sadist, remarking that all the battles up to now have been boring because he won every time with just one strike. Eurus assesses the situation and asks if their condition isn't bad enough for the boy to continue playing around. Then Kukuna asks if the dwarf dragon really thinks he's in danger. The clone approaches with an aerial attack, and the young man seems even more excited, declaring that there are two ways to end this fight. Everyone watching the battle is impressed by the protagonist's conclusion. Does he really have a way to win? Once again, we see the two crossing sticks, but unlike before, the impact is reverberating much more. Habak is curious, wondering what method the boy will use. Luna continues her picnic and states that the protagonist is bluffing. She adds that compared to other masters of Chrono Life, the Stitch is on another level. The mirror's ability is strong enough to be considered absolute, it's not a boss meant to be defeated, and she doubts very much that the boy will win. This girl never learns, as if a mirror would be a challenge for the protagonist. The boy's brilliant idea is to end the world like he did last time. This way, Han would return to the starting village, and that clone would consequently disappear. But Kukuna isn't in the mood for that. It's time to try something new. The blonde man and Luna are extremely relieved, and besides them, Cho is also anxious, even biting his nails. The president starts praying that the boy won't end the planet again. At this rate, the old man will die of stress. We return to the cave where Han's mother is holding her by the wrist. The woman says she won't be angry if the girl does her a favor. Habak would give Han's parents a lot of money if they could get the piece of God. The old woman argues that she's not even asking her daughter for money, so Han should give them the item. At least that's something she can do for her parents after all. They brought her into the world. But when the girl says she lost the glove of silence, the item they were looking for, her father steps up and glares at her. The man asks if she hid them somewhere. Crying, the girl says no, she really doesn't know where the glove is. The father, upset with her response, slaps Han, calling her ungrateful and asking if it's a waste of time helping her parents. Not enough, he questions if the girl has forgotten who fed her, changed her diapers, and put her to sleep. The man, even angrier, demands to know where his money is. Meanwhile, our boy continues to fight his clone. Suddenly, a magical circle appears and surrounds them. Eurus wonders if this is a new ability of the Novice Master class. The protagonist activates his talent called Gluttony, and a tentacle comes out of his mouth. The boy attaches his tentacle to the fake Kukuna's neck. Habak is relieved to know that using that ability was the boy's plan because the clone also copied that power. With that said, the clone uses the same attack. The Stitch says that his opponent is a mirror, and he should have understood that first. Completely convinced that the boy's strategy had failed, he lowers his guard, only to be attacked by surprise. The boy's real plan was to attack the main body, which is the one who summoned the clone. Habak realizes what happened at the last second, and the protagonist begins to say goodbye, but it's not over yet. The adversary regenerates and cuts the tentacle. Holding the mirror in his hand, he says he didn't think he would be cornered. The scene switches to a conversation between Luna and the blonde man. It's revealed that the piece of God was absorbed by Uriken, but the Stitch doesn't know this because Luna decided to hide it from him. Back at the battle, Habak decides to flee, as in his current condition, continuing the fight would be a huge disadvantage. The protagonist calls him a coward, and he agrees, so he takes the mirror and offers it as a reward for winning the fight. The reason behind this is that maybe the boy will spare his life. But the boy says that if he simply eliminates the boss, he'll earn a few more items. Habak argues that he needs to be alive for the mirror to work, so it's better to let him go. He then says goodbye and simply disappears. A system message appears congratulating Kukuna for becoming the owner of the mirror. But he doesn't really care about that. His primary goal was to rescue his friend. It seems the protagonist has a heart. We return to the cave where Han continues to be assaulted by her father. It would be better if she just followed the orders given to her instead of being a rebellious girl. With the girl lying on the ground, an idea quickly comes to the man's mind, believing that the gloves of silence aren't worth as much as his daughter's wealth. So from now on, they can just take the money from her. Han can't take it anymore. Her mother continues the conversation, explaining that since it's just a game, a protective order wouldn't work, meaning her daughter can't even try to ask for help. The girl starts trembling and her parents just smile, because from now on, their family will be united forever. So as a last-ditch plea, the girl asks for a hero to free her from this suffering. That's when our beloved Kukunha arrives, asking if by any chance the two are crazy, because she would simply stop playing the game. The parents can't handle the boy's intrusion, and when the man opens his mouth to start spewing nonsense, Kukunha decides to shut him up with a slap to the jaw. The protagonist says he's usually polite to older people, but these two are exceptions. Han's father calls the boy rude. Doesn't he know who they are? They're the girl's parents. Kukuna asks what kind of person threatens and steals money from their own child. Lee gets angry at the couple's behavior, especially for bringing real-life matters into that place that makes the game incredibly dull. Han's mother starts to say something, but at this point, she can't even form a coherent sentence. The protagonist asks why Han remains on the ground after so much humiliation, pointing out that in this world, her level is much higher than theirs. Han explains that she can't do anything. They're her parents. The boy despises that reaction. It doesn't make sense to take the game so seriously to the point of not doing anything even after being humiliated like that. But that wasn't enough to make her understand. So the boy says that if she's going to run away like she did in real life, it's better for Han to stop playing. Then the girl gets up, furious. How could someone who doesn't even know her life story tell her how to deal with her problems? Kukwena has no idea what she had to endure. The girl's mother comes closer and slaps her in the face, showing clear disdain for her daughter's suffering, focusing only on herself. It doesn't matter if the family is separated, because they'll always be her parents and Han will always be their daughter. Even if that's true, the weight of those words brought up bad feelings for the girl. The protagonist can't believe the woman's insensitivity, so the girl, who had long been trapped in her fears, decides to face her mother with her own hands, remembering everything that had happened. Her punch wasn't just an act of revenge against her family, but also an act of overcoming. She was her own savior, dealing with her problems alone in the end. The old woman even lost a tooth from the punch. After everything is resolved, we see Han speaking out in the real world. She finally publicly reveals her hobby by admitting she enjoys virtual reality games and introduces herself as a Chrono Life player. Not to mention exposing her true personality, even confessing in an interview that hitting monsters is a stress reliever. When asked about her controversial nature regarding her exaggerated kindness in real life and evident violence in games, she says that her violent side is probably part of her true nature, despite also being able to be a sweet person. Everyone blushes at that response. The girl concludes her thoughts by saying, "Who knows if these things really matter? Whether I am or am not a certain way, is that really important? And if you're looking for reality in a game, why play? After all, the goal is to be a distraction from the world's troubles." After all these statements, the girl became even more popular than before, and now even Kukwena, who watched all this up close, became a fan of Han Sarang. The protagonist enters the game and finds the girl very irritated. He is greeted with kicks because he was late again for an appointment they had. His excuse is that he was delayed because he was watching her interview on TV, but the girl says it was just a recording. Despite all these events, she didn't stop playing Chrono Life. On the contrary, she's been logging in more and more frequently. After greeting each other as usual, Han tells him to follow her and the boy simply agrees because he's scared. She smiles and says she'll forgive him this time, but with one condition: only if Kukwena carries her. Recalling past events on the day they met, it was the protagonist who asked to be carried by Han. But in the present, it seems the situation has changed. The girl says she doesn't know much about the game and humbly asks him to carry her, ultimately calling him master. Due to the large number of players in Chrono Life, there are many guilds, and among them, a few stand out. These are known as the 5 top guilds. However, one group took a completely different path from other organizations. They have an excellent intelligence network surpassing the World Guild, as well as a vast operational power that covers the entire continent. All members are at least of the Row class. The name of this guild is Robin Hood. One man was enough to make this entire organization disappear, being completely wiped out. We follow a man on top of a mountain, observing the chaos below. He was a member of the Robin Hood Guild, and seeing everyone in eternal sleep, he decides to leave the area, but someone appears behind him. The masked man reacts by instinctively slicing the man in half, but it wasn't enough to eliminate the stranger, and the masked man realizes this. In a single moment, the man appears behind him again and stabs him with a sword. The stranger acknowledges that this guild member was different, but still almost at the same level as the others. Apparently, he wouldn't survive, yet before he departs, the masked man asks who this man is and what the purpose behind this is. The unknown person says the reason is obvious. He's just doing this because it's fun. And he changes scenery. We're in the middle of the forest, and we see a carriage being pulled by a giant cat. The driver seems like a friendly old man and tells the passengers they'll soon arrive at the Rocky Mountain. Inside the carriage, we can see who the clients are. The protagonist and the girl seem to be traveling somewhere along the way, and we are told the story of their mode of transportation. This vehicle is very popular in Chrono Life, called the Manhua carriage, named after the demon cat that was tamed and brought into the human world, where it learned to pull carriages. The creator of this service is just some player with a professional taming talent. His profit is extremely high due to the success of his business. With this brief story concluded, the passengers finally arrive at the Rocky Dungeon. The protagonist looks at us with a chicken leg in his mouth, and it's said that this is an immense dungeon up to 1205 meters above sea level. Various level 30 monsters appear in that location. Since there are so many of them, it's a well-known place among beginners, as they can level up faster there. At least that's what Lee heard, but he never actually went there. The reason they are there is to level up Han. At that moment, she's much more serious than the boy expected. After asking him to carry her, they ended up in this situation. The boy says it's going to be very boring to help someone level up, and when he mentions this, he remembers the surprise he prepared for the girl, transcendental gauntlets which he gave her as a present because she lost the old ones. Han was very grateful. You can tell by the expression on her face, the main reason for so much happiness is that it had been a long time since she received anything. The protagonist doesn't understand how that's possible. A famous person like her should be surrounded by gifts. The girl says she gets a lot of things from her fans, but they can't compare to Kukwena, and the boy agrees with that. The girl reaffirms this in a special way. Then Han says she'll make good use of the gift, and when she stops to think, the name of his character in the game is still a mystery. The boy asks if he hasn't introduced his character name before. The girl says she saw the name when she invited him to a party a long time ago, but unfortunately, she forgot. When he tries to say his name, he's suddenly interrupted by the cat, which suddenly gets startled. They impact threw items and food into the air, and not only that, due to the unexpected stop, Han ends up falling on top of Kukunha. A moment later, the girl realizes she's holding onto a different stick than usual, because this one was the one the protagonist kept in his underwear. Eurus is shocked by the scene. Outside the carriage, a wounded person appears, asking for help. Everyone stared at him for a moment, and then, inside the vehicle, the masked man began telling his story, explaining that he had been attacked by a man with a mysterious class. The only thing he managed to find out was his name, and he was sure of only one thing. This guy isn't just any user, he seems to have the ability to copy items, having manifested a carbon copy of the mask in his possession. That character's name is Passive Kid. Eurus and Han found the nickname strange. The protagonist asked who he was, but the masked man didn't need to answer because Han already knew the man's identity. "That's Hong from the Robin Hood Guild," she said. The boy asked if she knew him, and she replied that even children knew who he was. Eurus added that Hong had fought against the boy on the day he killed the entire union of the 5 largest guilds. Hong asked for help to defeat the Passive Kid. To Lee, none of that mattered. Everyone had their own problems. Why should the protagonist help? Sure, the guild had been wiped out by some random guy, but that wasn't a good enough reason. Hong removed his mask and apologized, saying that since he was asking for help, he should at least introduce himself. The boy remarked that Hong was quite persistent. Then Hong introduced himself as the leader of the Robin Hood Guild. The boy's expression changed immediately. If it were a man, it would be one thing, but since it was a woman, helping her was nothing less than his duty. The guild leader thanked him for his kindness, assuring him that he wouldn't regret this decision, as the problem also involved him in some way. At the Chrono Life building, it was time for the workers to clock out. A staff member complained that he was envious because the team leader could go home. Some decided to work overtime, but the boss asked who had given them permission to stay late. They could go home. It was the leader's job to take care of everything related to the team. The employees asked if he was serious, pointing out that they had already been working overtime since the day before. Maybe he still hadn't reconciled with his wife. The boss promptly told them to shut up. Everyone said their goodbyes and left, leaving only the boss in the building. The man quickly changed his demeanor, grumbling that young people these days only pretended to be clueless and took advantage of everything in life without wanting to work, which was why they were doomed to a life of poverty. Now that everyone had left, it was time to make some money. Entering the game, we saw the man flying in the middle of nowhere. He drew his unique rank weapon, called the Executor's Sword. It seemed to have a magnificent power of destruction, but that wasn't all. Another striking feature was his level 999, the highest in the game. He said that now his real work could begin. An interview revealed that not even professional Chrono Life players could complete the game, but when someone reached the maximum level, they would receive a Transcendent rank item as a reward. This information leaked after it became a hot topic in the community, but no one had ever seen one of those items before. They only existed in stories. We saw Han admiring her new gauntlets. Amazed, she asked the boy if that equipment was really Transcendent level, and he confirmed that it was. He told her she could use it as much as she wanted since he still had plenty of those weapons in his stock. Hearing this, the girl equipped the gauntlet and a notification appeared, indicating that she was now the new owner of the item. Han marveled at her new equipment for a moment, but since her level was too low, she could only use a small fraction of the full power due to a lock on the weapon. Along with the seal, the gauntlet's appearance also changed to something much simpler. It didn't seem very efficient to use such weapons without being qualified, since one couldn't tap into the full potential of the equipment. It would be better to have a unique rank weapon. At least that was Han's rationale. But when she lightly touched a rock's surface, she caused massive damage with the smallest touch, even though the item was sealed due to her lack of power. Imagine if it weren't sealed. The poor protagonist had nothing to do with the whole thing, but ended up as a victim of the small disaster that occurred. Eurus commented that he couldn't wait until the girl experienced the real power of such equipment, and the boy agreed. Eurus was curious about what the boy would do regarding Hong's request, and the boy replied that he would accept it since the situation seemed to involve him. Returning to the carriage, the protagonist was confused, asking how this was related to him. What kind of connection could he have with Passive Kid if he didn't even know him? The masked woman mentioned that the man claimed to attack people for fun, but that was obviously a lie. His real goal was to make money by copying and selling items, pocketing large sums in the process. According to the guild leader's information, Kukunha was also a merchant player. While selling rare equipment posed a big problem, it wasn't illegal. However, in Passive Kid's case, it was different. His actions were illegal, involving abuse of authority. The boy didn't understand some things, but Hong just continued explaining. Either way, if they let this man operate freely, the market economy would collapse. The game itself would be in ruins. The boy remarked that there was no problem with that. All they had to do was report the criminal's actions to the company's customer service. That way, the user's bank account would be blocked, resulting in a happy ending. The masked woman said the protagonist was more naive than she had imagined. He was confused. Hong explained that if they reported him, they would only get an automated response from the company. At this point, the only person who'd stop Passive Kid was the master of the active stick, since Kukwenha had single-handedly eliminated the entire world union, not to mention his other feats. With a serious look, the boy stared at the masked woman, who then vanished. Now it was all in Kukwenha's hands. The fate of the entire game would be decided by him. As they say, with great sticks come great responsibilities. Thinking about it, Lee realized he had no choice but to fight to protect the game. Han asked if the boy had any ideas since they couldn't track down Passive Kid without clues. If they couldn't report him to customer service, the only option left was to bribe the higher-ups. Eurus and Han seemed surprised. By this point in the story, they shouldn't be so taken aback. After all, this boy was completely out of his mind. In real life, Lee was calling the game president, and to ensure that Choi would answer, he threatened to destroy the world again. The old man asked what on earth he wanted, and the protagonist burst out laughing and hung up the phone. Choi was very upset, but don't worry, it's all part of the plan. Since customer service didn't work well, talking directly to the game president should be enough. When the boy opened his front door to leave, he found Han outside, still wearing her school uniform. She insisted that she also wanted to speak with the old man. The boy first asked if that would be okay, considering that Han was a famous celebrity. But the girl said she didn't mind, and since it was late afternoon, no one would notice. In real life, Lee had to call her Han Sarang. Kukwenha felt embarrassed. Before leaving, the girl told her sister she was going for a walk with Kukwenha. After that, the scene cut to a restaurant. Choi entered, fuming with rage. How dare some kid be so rude to him? The president walked up to the protagonist to give him a good shake, but when he saw the girl sitting at the table, he asked if she was Kukwenha's girlfriend. The girl blushed, wondering if it looked that way, but the boy denied it before she could say anything. The two argued until Han told them to shut up, and Kukwenha trembled in fear, while the old man analyzed the situation. After they calmed down, the president was informed about the problem with Passive Kid, saying that this man was copying items to sell, but the old man didn't seem too concerned. He thought it was something important, which was why he came to meet Kukwenha, but something like this couldn't be resolved so easily, as there were various laws regarding money transactions and item sales, and the company couldn't interfere directly. The protagonist explained that someone saw the equipment being duplicated, but Choi remained stubborn, saying that they were probably mistaken. After all, this would only be possible if Passive Kid hacked the game. Kukwenha theorized that it might be a bug, but the president insisted there was no such problem in the game. Then Han asked them to focus. If external hacking was impossible, it was likely someone inside the company using admin tools to copy equipment and then sell it. Choi seemed concerned, but said this also wasn't possible. Even people inside the company with admin accounts wouldn't add a copy ability because it was useless. The president left, saying he was busy. He quickly said goodbye and wished the two a great date. Outside the restaurant, we saw the old man lighting a cigar surrounded by a few employees. Choi gave the order to prepare 5 trusted men. Back in the game, we see Han and Little Underpants looking downhearted because they couldn't make any progress. But the boy says that it doesn't matter who the enemy is, just use the ultimate stick to crush the passive boy or anyone else in the protagonist's way. The girl comments on how macho the boy is. Moving on, Han wonders what the passive boy's goal is. It's all very strange. No matter how much he thinks about it, if it's just for money, why attack the entire Robin Hood guild? The boy suggests that maybe the enemy's interest was in stealing the guild's valuable items. Han responds that this only makes things more suspicious. If copying the gear to sell is possible, why go after normal players and even annihilate an entire guild? Little Underpants thinks for a moment and admits he has no idea. The girl calls him an idiot. A massive explosion erupts nearby. Han believes it's a power similar to that of the protagonist. Little Underpants rushes towards the site. We move to the scene of the disaster, where we see Habak kneeling, seriously wounded. The passive boy is standing over him, saying that the monster isn't what the rumors suggest. It's nothing but a weakling. The Stitched Man asks why this person is doing this. As the coordinator of this world, his actions wouldn't be tolerated. If caught, would he be able to face the consequences? The passive boy, full of rage, grabs him by the neck and questions where all that arrogance comes from. How could a mere fragment of data dare speak like that to an administrator? The cheater threatens to eliminate Habak unless he reveals the location of his master, the infamous merchant known as Riot, the Sin of Sloth. The Stitched Man laughs at the situation, and when the administrator sees he's being mocked, he loses patience and raises his sword to deliver the final blow to Habak. But he's interrupted by a mysterious presence commanding him to stop. The administrator seems pleased to see this person, as it's one of his targets. One who arrived is Luna, also known as the Goddess of Life. The cheater tells the girl to wait her turn, as he's still finishing off Habak, and once he's done, he'll turn his attention to her. The goddess, smiling, says that all of this is so unnecessary, and that the man is nothing but a mule. The passive boy is offended, but the goddess continues to speak and calls him trash. The man still has his sword raised, but he seems to have lost his anger. Throwing Habak aside, the cheater says he's not going to waste time, she's next anyway. As he moves towards the goddess, he asks where Riot is. but the girl doesn't need to respond just yet. After all, it would be too easy if everything ended quickly. The passive boy threatens to do all sorts of terrible things to the goddess. Remaining silent, she recalls our protagonist and says that the two are similar, but at the same time completely opposite. The cheater says he doesn't understand what that means, and before he can say anything else, he's utterly crushed by a monster. The goddess looks on coldly, responding to the man's last question. Yes, he seemed like the protagonist, but at the same time he was very different, because the cheater was utterly disgusting. Then the goddess begins to walk away as if she's leaving, but something unexpected happens. The enemy is still alive. Standing up and asking if the monster that crushed him is the girl's servant, he immediately assumes that's why she's so confident. Luna looks confused, surprised that the man is still alive, but apparently he won't be for long, because now the girl will make sure he's dead. Trash like that doesn't deserve to live. The passive boy ignores the insults and says he doesn't care about that. An aura arises around them, filling the entire space. They are transported to the administrator's zone, a privilege granted for special purposes like game tests. The cheater tells the girl to stop thinking that place is like real life. In the end, she's nothing but a stupid girl. The goddess turns and keeps her focus on the enemy. Then, we are taken to another scene, where Han and Little Underpants are running toward the explosion site. Han asks if the situation has anything to do with the cheater, and Little Underpants, at the peak of his intelligence, says it's very likely. He also believes the hacker works for the game company, based on the conversation they had in the restaurant with the president. The old man denies this assumption because Choi said a hacker within the team was impossible, but his face said otherwise. She also heard about the cheater's feat. The man single-handedly wiped out the Robin Guild. That's why he's sure the guy has an account with various powers. Han says that's a great explanation, but is there any way to run faster? The boy says it's impossible because he has few points in agility, but it doesn't take long to get to the fight's location. As they notice the strange aura in the area, they wonder what it is. Habak is leaning against a nearby tree, and he explains the situation. Those are traces of the passive boy's skill. Habak then greets the protagonist, and the boy asks why he's there. The girl remembers being kidnapped by the man standing before them. Habak says he was attacked by the administrator, and besides that, the cheater dragged Luna into the test zone. The protagonist asks who Luna is, and the Stitch Man is surprised he doesn't know. After all, she's the goddess of life and his first love, and she talks a lot about the boy. The boy is confused by this, while Han grits his teeth in anger. Habak starts describing Luna, saying she's a woman with long black hair and a voluptuous figure. Only then does Lee realize she's the girl who betrayed him. Han, feeling jealous, says he doesn't know Little Underpants type of girl yet. But the young man makes it clear that he's not interested in Luna anymore, at least not now. The goddess herself is spreading those rumors. He even considers it offensive to think he'd like someone who insulted his parents. Han pretends to be indifferent, but he seems quite pleased inside. The dragon that had disappeared for the past 10 years shows up just to say they make a cute couple. Habak starts to worsen, and the boy comments that the Stitched Man will probably die soon, but Habak insists he's fine and asks for help from the protagonist. The boy asks why he should help. It would be much better to let him die and then grab the drop afterward. Han thinks that's a great idea, but Habak argues that if he dies, the mirror will also disappear. This worries our boy a bit. Placing his hand on his shoulder, Little Underpants says he'll heal him at all costs. The Stitched Man calls the protagonist worse than garbage. The girl asks how they're going to help the monster since they're out of healing potions. The boy tells her to relax, activating a skill called Cleric's Spirit, and he uses his talent to heal Habak. It was indeed a healing skill, but it took a long time to restore health. Perhaps the protagonist should have invested more points in the intelligence attribute. Little Underpants asks what happened to Habak's arm and continues, saying that the body will regenerate, but completely damaged parts won't restore. The Stitched Man explains that bosses like him only fully recover after death. So the boy has a brilliant idea. He just needs to eliminate the Stitched Man, and the situation will resolve itself. But it's not that simple. Special monsters like the Stitched Man don't respawn after being defeated. This happens because bosses with an unusual nature don't change much if they disappear. It's said that Eurus is also a rare monster, which is why he desperately begged for mercy from Little Underpants when they fought in the past. Besides them, Luna is also a unique boss. After this revelation, we see the protagonist's surprise. Inside the administrative zone, we resume the battle. The cheater is heading toward the goddess. The girl says he can come at her with everything he's got, and a series of extremely destructive attacks are launched by the passive boy. But none of it is enough to defeat the girl, who remains unharmed. She says she's the goddess of life and repeats what she told the protagonist. Humans can't kill a god. The administrator calls it childish, suggesting that the girl imagines herself to be very powerful. However, in the current state, the cheater has the advantage because after working in the company for so long, he's been able to access all of Luna's skills, so none of the girl's attacks will surprise him. The fight between Luna and Little Underpants was recorded and shared with senior team leaders at the company. The true nature of her power is revealed. Even if attacks hit the girl, none of them seem to work. This is the goddess's hidden ability called life creation. However, the attacks are nullified. Quite the opposite. Any hit she receives is effective, but her power allows her to regenerate at the moment of imminent death. Continuing the fight, the cheater attacks her again, and the girl immediately activates her talent and remains intact. The administrator says it's a predictable result, that power is absurd, which is why it was the most criticized ability during the initial game phase. We also discover the origin of Uriken. He was created from the goddess's life creation and the fragments of the missing head of Eurus. Apparently, the girl can make extremely powerful monsters. Luna says the cheater talks too much. If you can't win, all that knowledge becomes useless. With a single attack, the man is cut in half. The girl seems to really enjoy this method of elimination. Now the fight seems to have truly begun, but suddenly, the goddess's staff returns to its ordinary form. At this point, the man asks if she knows why they're in that space. The girl's regression to her initial level is a big surprise, leaving her completely defenseless and worried. The enemy enjoys the expression on the girl's face. Despite being so annoying, she could still make a cute face. Then Luna is mercilessly pierced by the cheater's sword. If he kills her, the master of Habek is sure to appear, right? As his final act, the administrator bids farewell to the goddess of life. In the real world, we're taken to a sort of hotel with several bottles of drinks on the table. The passive boy is drinking with a woman and a couple, saying that it's good to have some fun after doing a lot of overtime. The other man with him agrees, saying they made so much progress with their plan because they worked really hard. That was the final stage of the project. However, the cheater tells his friend that he's wrong. He couldn't find Habek's master, so the guy congratulates him on managing to kill Luna. But we discover that even that wasn't possible. The man is shocked, and the administrator brushes off his failure, saying there are other ways to meet Habek's master. Something isn't clear to his companion. Who exactly is this master that his boss is so eager to meet? The cheater asks if the man has been his subordinate all this time without knowing the main objective behind his actions. Supposedly, this guy has been devoted enough to work without asking questions since his youth. Basically, this master is one of the game's bosses, tied to the main story of Chrono Life. The creature is the greatest merchant known as Sloth. Even with this explanation, the lackey seems unsure, asking if the monster is really a merchant. The answer is clear. If the lazy one wants to be a vendor, he will be. That's the kind of freedom in the game. Straining his memory for relevant information, the intern says he's heard about this boss before. When he thinks about it, a monster named Uriken caused a lot of chaos and was known as gluttony for having an ability that absorbed others. His boss feels embarrassed. The boy doesn't even know that these monsters are classified as the 7 deadly sins. It's a concept often used in films and games, the sins being pride, greed, envy, wrath, lust, gluttony, and finally, sloth. These sins are the source of all others, hence why they're called the 7 deadly sins. The team leader asks if the intern now understands the concept behind the game's main story. Eurus represents pride, Uriken represents gluttony, Riot represents sloth, and Luna represents lust. Finally, the intern starts using his brain power to try to figure something out, saying it's obvious. As expected, Luna was also a unique boss in Chrono Life. Of course, someone with such a powerful ability couldn't be an ordinary player, otherwise it would completely disrupt the world's balance. Continuing with the story, the administrator tells the intern not to get confused. The girl might be a unique monster, but she's not an NPC. The boy asks what that means. Could an ordinary player really become one of the greatest monsters in that world? The old man explains that the freedom in the game is so great that it defies simple interpretation. Just as a monster can become a renowned merchant, an ordinary player can also become a special class boss. Finally, we're back to the journey of Little Underpants, the most sought-after man of the moment. Look at his cute little face. It seems the group was discussing the same topic as the guys earlier. Suddenly, Luna became famous and Little Underpants grows impatient, not knowing who this girl really is. He questions Habek, but even the stitched man isn't sure if the girl is a mix of NPC and player or just one or the other. However, the coordinator of that world should know more about it since the passive boy is an administrator. Great, another reason for the protagonist to beat the guy up. Han says he doesn't understand something. Why does the cheater desperately want to meet Riot, the sin of sloth? If his goal is to make money, he just needs to put the copied items on auction and wait for some sucker to buy them. There's also the matter of his senseless attack on the Robin Hood Guild. His actions make no sense. Personally, Habek has an idea why the administrator did all that. From his perspective, it could be related to the peace of God, but it's likely it's a mythical rank item. Little Underpants remembers hearing about the peace of God before. Eurus mentions that possessing the divine fragment was the reason for Han's kidnapping. He further explains that the term peace of God is another name for mythical rank items. Out of nowhere, Hong shows up. She seems to have been hiding in the bushes to eavesdrop on their conversation. Do you think this girl is a strong candidate to be the protagonist's second wife, or is Han enough? With the energy of our Little Underpants, I'm not sure one will be enough. Back to the story, the leader of the Robin Hood Guild apologizes for disappearing. It turns out there were ways to get information, so she left to conduct her own investigation. Along with her explanation of why she disappeared, a masked woman asks everyone to form a group for a while. She says she's found the hideout of the thieving boy. At the location that's supposedly the enemy's base, everyone is amazed at the house's simplicity. Hong says there's no doubt about it. She even checked the owner's identity with her judgment skill. This talent confirms who owns the place. Little Underpants asks where the abusive boy is now, but there's no sign of him. The leader says it's a pity they can't see inside the house. However, the boy with the stick remembers the teachings from his time. When something doesn't work, just hit to fix it. In this case, if the door won't open, just break down the wall. Everyone goes inside the house and stands in front of a pile of gold. Han is amazed by the number of items. Could they all be copied? Hong says none of those pieces of equipment are copied, and moreover, they're all mythical rank. Guessing at a value, everything should cost around 5 billion. You can also see several items stolen from the Robin Hood Guild. The thief must have stored them in that house because he didn't have enough space in his inventory. As expected, the abusive boy's goal is to collect mythical ranked materials. Little Underpants asks if the cheater does this because of the price of those items on the market. If that's the case, it would be better to gather a lot of weapons by defeating monsters in the Urus nest, just like the protagonist did in the past. Hong says if the passive boy did something like that, the company would definitely notice, just like they did with Little Underpants. Mythical items are on a different level, and there's an entity that can buy them for an outrageous price. Our boy quickly figures out who she's talking about. The buyer is the greatest merchant in Chrono Life, Riot the Sloth. Habak says he was thinking the same thing. The Robin Hood Guild leader takes the situation seriously. Regardless, it's a great plan. After all, the sloth isn't an ordinary player, so there's no risk of information leaking. Not to mention that selling the items individually won't affect the game's economy, which makes it unlikely the company would catch him. But now that there's proof of the crime, all they need to do is report it to customer service and action will be taken. The administrator has been collecting items in his personal space. This is all the evidence needed to ruin his career. With a smile, Hong congratulates everyone on their work. This is why everything will work out, because of them. Little Underpants asks with whose permission she's going to report this. Is she directing a drama? She hasn't stopped talking all day. The leader is confused and asks if there's any other alternative besides that. Little Underpants joyfully responds that there is, of course. They give the abusive boy a good lesson. In the starting village, we see the protagonist wearing a Robin Hood Guild mask. In front of him is the infamous cheater, with an expression of pure joy. Han wonders if this is the man he's heard so much about in recent days. If this guy is the abusive boy, then he took the bait just like Lil Underpants said he would, right in the center of town. The cheater asks why the mask, and our boy says he borrowed it, because he's a famous figure. Anyone would recognize him if he walked around without a disguise. Hong watches from a distance with a few members of her guild, who ask if that's not the murderous boy who wiped out a large portion of the organization. She confirms the members' assumption and adds that everything is under control. So far, the plan is going as planned. A guild member asks what's the purpose of approaching the middle of the village. Back at the Mammal Boy's cabin, the protagonist continues to develop his plan. First, they have to collect all the items from the place. His prospective wife asks why, and Little Underpants just says to do it. Besides, he asks to borrow a mask, preferably the one she's wearing. Unfortunately, Han seems to be marking his territory. A single critical hit would be enough to dismantle Little Underpants right in the middle. Sometime later, we see the fool boy arriving at his house. He finds only half of the wall still standing, and he quickly assumes he's been robbed. When he enters to check, that's exactly what happened. On the floor is a note, and the message says for the robbed boy to go to the center of the starting village at 7 p.m. He wants his items back. Love, Little Underpants. After reading that note, the man grinds his teeth in anger, maintaining the same expression even now, facing the most overpowered human in the whole game. The stolen boy asks how the protagonist dares take all his money. Little Underpants tells him to calm down and not get too close. Then he asks Han for an item. With the weapon in hand, the protagonist threatens to sell it to the NPC shop if the cheater keeps coming closer. Disbelieving, the passive boy asks Lee to stop. That equipment is worth 200 million in-game currency, and if he sells it to a bot, he'll only get 300 gold. Finally, the man asks what the protagonist wants. Little Underpants says he wants nothing more than to have some fun with him. Would there be a problem with that? How will the passive boy react now? Watching him tremble with rage is just too satisfying for our stick-wielding boy. Amidst the provocations, the cheater loses his cool and uses his privilege called the administrative zone. The battle begins within the space, and the opponent questions how a nobody dares fight against an administrator. He probably doesn't even know that Lee doesn't flinch even for the president, let alone someone lower in the hierarchy. A blow strikes the protagonist, throwing him away and splitting his mask in half. Little Underpants despises the man's attitude, calling an in-company player useless. The opponent advances, saying that game addicts like the protagonist forget about reality. They are so immersed in the game that they go crazy and treat characters like they're humans. According to Lee, it's shameful to blame players for no reason. Is the cheater having a midlife crisis? The murderous boy moves back to prepare an attack. The protagonist tries to predict its direction but can't, getting hit by thousands of strikes at once. This time, the cheater seems to want to convey a deeper message, saying that all players are equal. It doesn't matter how much hard work the developers put in, all they get is insults and criticism. 7 years ago at the Chrono Life headquarters, there was the young developer. But we're back in the present because the protagonist isn't interested in pointless chit-chat. How dare he try to use the villain's sad backstory to justify himself? Little Underpants doesn't care. All the troublesome boy will get is stick to the face and a lot of shouting. The careless opponent takes a direct hit from our boy but regenerates with a healing factor. Little Underpants wonders what abilities the administrator can still use since they're confined in a room where he's the supreme authority. The item thief uses the skill called Spirit of a Titan. Impressed, Lee imagines what attributes were enhanced by activating this skill. A gigantic aura forms and begins to envelop the man. That's the Spirit of the Titan. While the talent is active, damage and range are increased by a mere 1000%. Just by swinging his sword, the attack covers a ridiculous area. While the protagonist quickly realizes that this is clearly hacking, so he activates the gluttony skill to absorb the cheater's status. But the passive boy reacts by activating a speed skill, initiating another sequence of attacks. Little Underpants doesn't seem to be in a very good condition. The ragged boy says the outcome of a battle is determined by status and calculation, and he has all attributes at level 99,999. The protagonist soon takes a punch to the stomach, and the passive boy says that it doesn't matter how good his control is against such an enormous power difference, there's no chance of winning. He even belittles the boy's game mechanics, saying from his perspective he's just an idiot who relies on items to reach the highest level. This doesn't make our boy happy. Hearing this from everyone is annoying, but that man is also just a criminal taking advantage of an administrative account. Yet you can see the cheater's nonchalant expression. He even asks if the protagonist isn't jealous. After all, he only needed to make a few adjustments to the data to become the strongest character. Before the passive boy can finish his thought, he gets headbutted by our boy, thrown back, disoriented, and wondering how he got knocked down so fast, even though the opponent's agility is so low. Little Underpants, lying with his face on the ground, says it's just a game mechanic. Once again, the battle reaches its peak when the cheater decides to use another talent called Speed of Light Dash, which seems like an improved version of the previous skill. All confident, Little Underpants' enemy says to come at him with everything he's got, and nothing he does will compare to his power. The protagonist uses a strike from his stick to propel himself and gain speed, allowing him to hit his target head-on. Isn't that amazing? He only needed to turn off the rebound control option in the game settings. He also asks how it feels to take a hit like that, but his opponent doesn't yield and keeps talking about how the game's mechanics are garbage, so Little Underpants shouldn't get too excited. The boy agrees, saying it's true because it's much slower than using a speed skill, but he concludes that it's past time to end this. The angry boy tells the protagonist that he doesn't understand the situation. Because of that lucky hit, Little Underpants has become way too overconfident. A mere player can't win a battle against an administrator. However, the protagonist says there's a way. Raising his hand toward the enemy, the boy bids farewell to the passive boy. Even though he was fast, it was fun. Suddenly, we're back in the square where Han is sitting, wondering about Little Underpants' situation. Hong is beside her, commenting that she doesn't know the details either. Even his girlfriend doesn't know that it must really be confidential information. Han is giddy after being recognized as the protagonist's girlfriend. The leader of the Robin Hood Guild says something is bothering her. The reason Little Underpants is missing must be related to his method for defeating the passive boy. We return to the battle, where the protagonist seems to be summoning something and the administrator trembles with fear, thinking he's about to be defeated. Then the boy activates his summoning skill. The cheater bursts into laughter. How does Lee intend to win with something so simple? Even though his class is very special, it wouldn't be possible to summon a super powerful monster. However, the cheater quickly goes silent because the man standing before him is Choi, the company president. With a look of surprise on the opponent's face, the protagonist starts laughing. It was worth bringing the president even after so much work. The previous day, we see the criminal in the real world, just leaving the small party he had with his intern. His friend invites him for another round of drinks, but the man refuses because he has some obligations in the game and needs to finish some calculations. The employee is impressed with his boss's passion for work and says he respects that. In response to the compliment, the passive boy tells the kid not to mess around and go home. They're going to be very busy the next day. Grabbing the shoulder of a blonde girl, the intern says he's going to have a few more drinks. He's walking calmly until he's stopped by Choi and some of his men. Moments later, we see the young man with his face completely busted, admitting all the plans he made with the cheater, revealing that he was just following his boss's orders. After hearing this, the president orders his thugs to get rid of the kid. Then Choi turns to thank the protagonist. It was thanks to him that they managed to catch a traitor before the situation became even more problematic. Lee gets scared. Is this a gaming company or the mafia? The old man warns that he intended to kill Little Underpants if he called him again without a good reason. Returning to the main topic, the president says he's already taking steps to deal with the passive boy. They plan to bring in the legal department to sue him in every possible way, and of course they'll fire the cheater as well. The protagonist asks if, by any chance, the old man has any plans for tomorrow at 7 p.m. Choi replies that he doesn't, so Lee smiles and invites the old man to give the abusive boy a lesson. Back in the administrative zone, we see the delinquent shaking in the presence of the president. Desperate, he tries to leave the game, but that's not possible during a battle. As a last-ditch effort, the man tries to dissolve this administrative zone. Little Underpants warns the president that the sleazeball is trying to escape, so Choi activates his own presidential zone. Right away, the cheater is filled with fear. It doesn't matter anymore, he was going to be fired anyway, so he decides to attack the old man. However, he can't even touch the president. His in-game status has no limits, it's literally infinite. Preparing his ultimate attack, Choi fires the cheater, and as a parting gift, gives him a black eye. One punch was enough to annihilate someone like the passive boy, and so the problem came to an end. All the stolen mythical items returned to their rightful owners. It turned out that other guilds had been affected, not just Robin Hood. But the perpetrator was fired on the same day, and even in real life, the cheater took a beating from the president. Afterward, he tried to sue the old man for assault, but that only made things worse for him. No one was interested in incriminating Choi, so all charges against the president were dropped. Now the man is going to spend the rest of his life paying back the company for material damages. Some rumors say he's been permanently banned from the gaming industry. After that day, Little Underpants' life as a merchant returned to business as usual. In the starting village, the protagonist meets with his two wives, who greet him happily. Everything was back to normal. Exiting the game, we see Lee, who mentions he's annoyed because he didn't get to ask the cheater what Luna's true nature is. Looking ahead, our boy sees a beautiful girl sitting on the couch. In front of him, the girl says it's been a while. Shortly after, we see them eating at the table. The girl compliments the appearance of the food, saying it looks great. At least now there's no doubt. Obviously, Luna isn't an NPC. What a beautiful woman, my friends. She's always been a player. She looks at Lee and they lock eyes. Then she asks if she's really that beautiful. The boy says he wasn't looking for that reason. She must be imagining things. She should just stop being silly and eat in silence. Little Underpants is very nervous, remembering the past and realizing he can't let himself be swayed by the girl's looks. So he starts questioning, asking who she is and how she knows his address and the password to his house. Since Lee gave her food, it's worthy of a reward. Besides, the boy must be curious about many things. This is his chance to ask anything. The girl will answer everything. The boy says he understands and starts with a light topic. What's her natural hair color? When they met for the first time in the game, it was light pink. Luna is happy that the change in her appearance was noticed, and she confirms that yes, that's her natural hair color. Luna gets curious. Maybe Little Underpants prefers pink hair. Should she dye it? Without wasting time, the protagonist wants to know if the girl is a special boss in the game. In the past, the goddess of life apparently died at the hands of the passive boy. If that really happened, her user should have been deleted. In response, she says that she was eliminated, but her character didn't disappear. This was because her death occurred in a human state. She didn't know it at the time, but if you were attacked by an administrator in the test zone, the god's authority vanishes. It was a relief, otherwise she would have died as a unique boss and not in her human form, which would have meant her user being deleted. The protagonist asks if she intends to kill 1,000 players again to become the goddess of life once more. Luna asks if the boy really thinks that just by eliminating 1,000 players, she can regain her former class. The boy is confused. She explains that it's only one of the conditions to become the goddess of life, and on top of that, you need to complete very complicated tasks. Only then can you change class. Plus, the girl has full control over her form. She can turn human or goddess at will. She asks if that was all, and the protagonist thanks her for answering all his questions. But Luna still hasn't said who she is. Lately, wherever Little Underpants goes, the girl follows as if she's stalking him. Doing that outside the game is also crazy. If everything isn't clarified, he's going to call the police. Trying to explain her condition, she says that many people are hindering her goal. The reason she traveled a long way to our boy's house was to make an offer. Luna begs for Lee to be her man. That's quite the charmer. He got the girl to take the initiative. Thinking it's a proposal, Little Underpants gets extremely confused. The doorbell rings. Thank goodness. Just imagine having to stay in a situation like that. The boy quickly heads to the door, thinking it might be his escape from the awkward atmosphere. But it turns out that the person at the door is his future girlfriend. If she finds his mistress or guests in the house, that would be a huge problem. Hannah's welcomed in and says she's impressed with the house, it's very organized. She notices the food on the table, and Little Underpants trembles with fear. The longer they keep talking, the greater the chance something will go wrong. So Lee asks why his neighbor visited, and she responds that she came to talk to him about the game and asks when he'll be available. Unsure, he says they can probably play in the morning. We see that Luna is hiding behind the wall, listening to their conversation, which is nearing its end. Han says it's settled. They'll play early in the morning. If Lee is late, he won't be forgiven. Before leaving, we see her ask for the protagonist's cell phone number. She can't come to his place in person every time she wants to talk. It's not every day our boy gets his celebrity's contact, so he asks if it's okay. Done. Their number is saved. Ham was about to leave, but before she goes, she warns that if her messages aren't answered, well, you don't want to know what will happen. The protagonist says he understands. On the other side of the door, we see the girl having a mini meltdown. She finally got his number. Did everything go well? Maybe it was too sudden. Okay, better hurry up and send a message. Back inside Little Underpants' house, he wonders why all this is happening, especially in the middle of the night. Luna asks why he asked her to hide. It's not like they were doing anything weird, but the boy says that just having her there is unusual. Yep, folks, women don't miss a chance to go after Little Underpants. Sometime later, we see our black-haired goddess remembering what happened that day. After asking the protagonist to form a group with her, the young girl ends up being rejected by him, who asks why he should play with her since he was stabbed the last time. Besides, he is in a group with the love captain and would probably be beaten if he stopped participating. Then we see that our waifu is watching our protagonist and his colleague from afar. She says she is jealous, and that makes her want to ruin her. But this time, she will let it go as he will end up killing that woman anyway, and he will be her man. All this for the sake of the end of Chrono Life. Then we see the little dragon annoyed saying that he can't carry her since the level difference is huge and it's impossible to do that. Then the young girl ends up noticing something strange and sees the protagonist talking to the wind. Thinking he's schizophrenic, she questions why he's talking to himself, leaving the protagonist confused, asking if she can't see this dragon project. However, the draconic spirit warns that only the protagonist can see it. But if he shares his mana, then the dragon could be instantiated into reality. The little boy questions if it will really work since his intelligence and wisdom are low, but the dragon confirms. So he starts injecting his mana into him, creating a huge purple lightning bolt. And Eurus' soul begins to be instantiated into reality. Seeing that light gathering in front of the protagonist, the young girl is extremely confused about what's happening as something begins to form. And our little dragon Eurus appears in reality, making a very cute face, which is capable of delivering a fatal blow to the young girl, making her scream, the protagonist asking if she can pet him. By hearing these words, the dragon gets irritated, questioning how a mere human can dare to want to touch him. But the protagonist confirms that it's okay, and she heads towards him. Suddenly, he hears a voice calling him, and when he looks, he questions what he is doing there. Then we see that it is Habak next to a griffin. The stitched one says that the situation got a little worse, and he fled in a hurry to meet our protagonist. But the hero questions how he found him, discovering that this is one of his abilities. Practically, he creates a mirror with GPS capable of locating a person who has already been his opponent. Habak says it's not time to talk about that, and that right now that person is going to appear. But before continuing his sentence, the protagonist interrupts, saying that his arm has regenerated, discovering that it was his master who did it. Suddenly, the two feel a strong tremor, leaving the girl who is holding onto the little dragon like a teddy bear confused, while the stitched one just gives a small smile and says he has arrived, his eternal master and also the master of the Great Throne, the one who is known as the disaster of laziness. The girl is impressed with all that and with those angelic armored soldiers, but the protagonist is quite alert with this disaster. At first he thought they would all be humanoid monsters like Habak, but his throne is immensely large. The stitched one takes his griffin and goes to the throne, apologizing to his master since he didn't have time to explain the details to the hero. But the disaster of laziness says it's okay since he himself will explain the situation to him. Upon hearing this, Habak looks a little scared but soon understands the situation, as that gigantic throne falls and crashes violently to the ground in front of the protagonist, causing such a strong impact that it almost makes the two fly away. The god of laziness says it is a pleasure to meet him since he has heard a lot from his subordinate and that apparently he is the current hero. Now seeing the real appearance of the god of laziness, the protagonist is scared, while the man gives him a threatening look. Elsewhere, we see an abandoned temple. The previous goddess walks through this temple calmly until she finally finds her goal. Then we see that she is in front of a throne with someone sitting on it. This person is the first hero Suryopi, who has been dead for hundreds of years. She discovered that he was the first hero because of the game's description since he was a legendary, complete, and familiar man. Suddenly the symbol on her forehead starts to glow. But our waifu already knew this would happen, and it's exactly as expected. Then she places the staff in front of her, and even without knowing who had the idea of creating such a childish and cliched story in the game, she still likes it a lot since that's the charm of Chrono Life. Her staff starts to glow a lot, and soon a golden aura begins to circulate her entire body. Meanwhile, near the beach, we discover that the disaster of laziness, one of the 7 deadly sins, contains the troop of the strongest angel tribe. It was also called the Great Merchant, a presence consistent with this huge throne made 100% of pure gold. However, the grand and majestic presence of the disaster comes in the appearance of an angelic little boy, standing on a throne clearly very disproportionate to his size, leaving the protagonist and the love captain confused with this scene. While the little dragon calls him a brat and that he continues with the same charisma as always even after they have known each other for so long, the disaster starts to float and approaches the protagonist and his group. He introduces himself as the Great Merchant and Disaster of Laziness, asking if he is the hero that his subordinate mentioned. The little boy confirms that he is while wondering what this feeling of being tormented by a child is, but the child in front of him gives a scary look and says that the hero's level has dropped a lot, making the protagonist get irritated with these sudden insults. But before saying anything, he is hit by a kick from the disaster, making a little ketchup splash from his mouth while he is confused. Soon the young man prepares another attack, delivering a spinning kick to his face and throwing him violently against a rock. Havoc is confused by his master's actions, asking why he is attacking the hero since he was the one who helped him. But the lazy one tells him to shut up, since if he wanted to talk then he wouldn't have come. They are an existence that will always be the opposite of humans and can't believe his subordinate unnecessarily approached him. Hearing this, the stitched one is a little shocked by his master. But the protagonist stands up, saying that he is right and that a player and a monster will never be friends. So now that he made the first move, there is no problem in beating up a child. The disaster still looks irritated and tells him not to be mistaken, since it was the protagonist who made the first move. Then he licks his leg and stomps the ground, creating a huge shockwave, reminding that the protagonist killed the capital sin of pride, Eurus, and accelerated the whole process. Then throws a huge stone in his direction, and while preparing to hit it back, the protagonist asks why he is complaining about this now, destroying the rock with just one attack, which soon after turns into a huge shockwave, exploding everything in its path. Quickly, the little angel appears, saying that Eurus was the strongest boss in the game. Then he kicks the protagonist in the belly and says that the sin of pride was supposed to be in the final raid of the main story, however he was killed, messing up the whole order. Moreover, the sin of gluttony also should not have been consumed that way and should have been defeated in 10 years. The young girl says that at that time it was Eurekan who attacked him first, while the protagonist only defended himself. But the lazy one just tells her to shut up, automatically making the young girl's sweat cold. While with a threatening look, he questions how she dares to interrupt him, falling to the ground out of fear. She wonders why she is feeling all this pressure inside a game and that she wasn't like that even when she faced Eurekan. Little Eurus is watching all this with a neutral expression, until he notices something and starts staring at the little lazy one in front of him. He explains that Eurekan was born because Eurus was killed, and in the end the protagonist caused all this. And the problem that has been growing since then will soon explode. The first hero Yopi, known as the strongest human in Chrono Life, will be resurrected soon. Then we see that this process has already begun to happen, and a glowing aura begins to circulate the skeleton's body. While the goddess gives a small smile and says she knows it's not time to wake up yet, so she had to go there personally to share her powers with the dead. The aura that is circulating her body begins to reconstruct her armor, until it is 100% complete. The protagonist asks the young lazy one what the problem is with this guy resurrecting, since if he was a hero in the past, then he should be on humanity's side. But hearing this, the little angel sighs and says that the protagonist is dumber than he thought, explaining that the hero will not be resurrected as a human but as one of the 7 deadly sins. Annihilation will be his only purpose, so we see a symbol forming on the ground. Suddenly, small cracks begin to form, and a skeletal hand comes out of it, showing itself in the form of the skeletal soldier. Suddenly, the hall is already infested with several soldiers, while the goddess says that he is the strongest human and the first hero, the one who loved and trusted humans, but is the one who hates humans more than anyone. It really is a childish story, but perfect to represent the deadly sin he received. The undead army is already fully prepared, while Yopi presents himself as the first hero in the capital sin of wrath. The Chrono continent has existed since ancient times, a place where there are no wars, not even disputes, a blessed world full of peace. However, one day the demons appeared. They attacked the residents and decimated the houses. In an instant, the continent turned into hell. But at the time, a light appeared in the midst of disaster. This was Yopi, who was later called the first hero. But before the story continued, the protagonist jumps, as he is not a fan of hearing the game's stories, but understands that the dark hero was resurrected, yet the young man was there just to beat him up and say whatever he wanted. Our little boy says he defeated Eurus with just one punch, so he doesn't understand why he should worry about the first hero, much less why he should be afraid of him. The lazy one says that the protagonist is more foolish than he thought, and can't believe he doesn't know human fear even when he is one. So he warns that everyone will be attacked by the hero himself soon after turning to leave. The protagonist still questions where the boy is going, since he thought he had gone there to fight. But the lazy one says he was wondering about the current hero's situation. But it seems it was nothing serious, and leaves a warning that he walked alongside the hero Yopu, also being the only human he recognized. So he can confirm this very well, and the protagonist is not able to defeat him. But our hero just said that this made him more willing to beat him up. And while preparing an attack, he says he won't let him go so easily after being attacked. But before doing anything, he is stopped by the stitched one, getting extremely irritated and ordering to be released immediately. But the guy tells him to calm down and that there's no need to fight since the conversation ended well. The protagonist remembers that he was just attacked, but still he asks him to calm down since he is making a lot of money selling items. He explains that the person who was buying all the protagonist's items was precisely the great merchant who spent 15 billion gold. Meanwhile, we see the face of a giant skeletal dragon along with the entire undead army of the hero. Speaking to Luna, he said he understands and that many years have passed since he died. She said he should have been resurrected much later. But the main story is already a mess, and since she has already provided enough mana, then he won't need to worry. The hero thanks and says he will repay her if he gets a chance later. Then our waifu asks where he is going, but the hero says she is asking the obvious. At that moment, the dragon starts to take off, and even with its wings entirely made of bones, it manages to fly through the skies. The skeletons also quickly advance towards something, and the great resurrected hero said that right now he is going to destroy the world he once protected, activating his instant teleport and simply disappearing in front of Luna. She gives a small sigh, while seeming happy that her work is finally over. But remembering the consequences of her actions, she wonders if everything is really okay. Something asks if she regrets and remembers that she did what she wanted in the case of Uriken. Luna replies that this is different from that time since that boy seems to be a shadow in the main story. Then the man who was talking to her apologizes and says they should just enjoy. Then he goes back to observing the entire planet of the game and seems curious to see how this world will be cleaned. We return to the beach and see the protagonist scared, while asking if it was really this boy who bought all the items he sold. The disaster says that to be exact, he spent 15303890000 gold, but later put them up for sale for a total of 51.7 billion, making a profit of 37 billion. Our little boy is amazed hearing that, even calling the little boy Hyun, soon after begging him to teach him the business tricks. Suddenly, the two start hearing a great tremor, but the little angel already knows what it means. Urvis and Han seem extremely scared by what they are seeing. Then the disaster of laziness warns that he has arrived, and as the skeletal dragon passes by the group, we find that this is really the end of the world. Even the protagonist seems scared seeing that. And so suddenly a war began. The skeletal soldiers advanced while eliminating the players from the initial village. Because of the alarming number of soldiers, they were not able to do anything, even wondering what this surprise attack is since monsters shouldn't invade the village as if it were nothing. Suddenly a system message appears, explaining that this is a main mission in the game and that players must protect the world from the sin of wrath. While he is confused by the fact that there is a main mission in Chrono Life, the man with cat ears is attacked by a skeletal soldier. Soon everyone realizes that they don't have time to look at the mission window, otherwise they will end up dying. But the chances of survival are also not very high since there are monsters everywhere. The skeletal soldiers seem to laugh scarily, while the remaining players do their best to survive. The bald man wonders if the hero wasn't supposed to be on humanity's side, questioning why he would ruin life in Chrono Life. Then a mage appears casting a flaming hurricane, eliminating several skeletal soldiers at once. The people there recognize her as the strongest royal sorceress Abracadabra, and she explains that she received orders from the royalty to protect this sacred land. Seeing that the players who are completely injured start to feel hope, since the strongest sorceress and all the royal guards have been mobilized. Their response was quick and precise, much better than the last event against gluttony. But a light starts to be emitted from the sky, and when they look, they see the skeletal dragon preparing a large-scale spell. A flaming ball is created in its mouth and soon after fired at the city. We realize that the reason for the defeat is that they were not ready yet since this event was a main mission. And as it was supposed to happen in a few years in the future, the current players didn't have the resources to fight against it. So we go to the Hill of Heroes, where the former hero and now the capital sin of wrath appears. He looks at the tomb of his friends while thinking that it has been a long time. The first tombstone has a musical instrument, so he remembers his companion who thanked him for letting her sing to the world. A second had a small wing, which represented the saint who always prayed for her companions. The third tombstone had a wizard's hat, which represented a man who didn't care about world peace and just wanted to be by the hero's side. Remembering his companions, the disaster begins to cry blood. The good memories he had with his companions are soon overshadowed by bad memories, and Yopi starts to release his aura while ordering the dead to resurrect. From the tombstones, 3 skeletons emerge, while the hero warns that he will not allow them to follow an honorable path like they did. The honorable wizard has part of his skull missing. The cleric has holes that represent crying under her eyes, and the bard has large scars on his jaw like someone who sang beyond his capacity. The hero with his blood-red eye and a threatening look orders his former companions to get ready, as it is time to end the story that never ended. Then we return to the protagonist picking his nose, and saying that this so-called hero will lose to the stick, just like the others. As he walks, he says it's been a while since he used the intercontinental strike. Then the disaster asks if everything will be okay since normal players can be caught by the attack and die. There is also an army of undead, and if his attack does not have the holy attribute, it will not work. So this powerful attack he prides himself on will also be useless, and when the server restarts, the army will still be alive. Warning that no matter how strong he is, he won't be able to face this war alone. The protagonist said that it seems fun, and will still try alone. The war will be stopped by him and his faithful squire. Then he prepares his wooden stick, disables the rebound control option, and with a great impact launches himself upwards, quickly flying towards the city like a superhero. The captain is confused, wondering where the little boy is, soon discovering that he used the rebound to fly away. The lazy one watches the protagonist going to the city while thinking that he likes his "I don't give a damn" attitude. The main village is now turned into a sea of flames, and the starting point of everyone's journey has now turned into a cemetery of players. All this because of a monster who managed to turn this once peaceful place into a city of death in the blink of an eye. Outside the game in a rental store, some people curse, saying that Chrono has gone crazy and that every time something like this happens. Hearing people's complaints, the part-time worker who is about to give up starts trying to calm them down, explaining that the server may have crashed and he should log in again. But soon an angry man explains that a skeletal dragon sprouted in the village, and if they log in, they will die again. Actually, the man is so furious that he wonders if he should start playing something else. But the woman next to him says that this is more fun than mindlessly hunting every day. The guy who was previously irritated just hearing a woman talking starts to agree with everything she says, asking if she wouldn't like to play with him but being rejected right away. While observing his cell phone, he notices that the Chrono Life site has just released an update note. But when he reads the contents of the note, he gets scared, wondering if this is really an official notice. Soon everyone in the store also reads the note and starts debating whether they have gone crazy or something. And if this notice is true, it means that the game's server could end soon. At the president's office, a man says that this is madness, explaining that the main scenario cannot be completed with the current level of players, and that this is a problem that the company's management team should intervene. But the president questions if he is crazy. Recalling the company's policy of non-interference, the man still doubts his president's actions, reminding him of the notice he posted on the site, which said that the main scenario of Chrono Life has begun, and from now on the fate of the world will be determined by the players. If they fail this mission, the hero will win, and the Dark Age will be the new setting as all life will be massacred, explaining that the future of the game is in their hands. Returning to the game, we see the village in flames, while the skeletons who have already cleaned up the city just stand still, but soon they look at the sky, seeing something strange. A meteor has just landed in the middle of the city, and from the smoke, we see that the meteor is actually the protagonist, who says that traveling like this is fast, but landing is a problem. At that moment, he hears a piercing scream, and when he looks around, he sees that he is completely surrounded by skeletal soldiers, but he is just happy as he ended up in the right place. The soldiers advance to attack him, but just by swinging his stick, he manages to crush the skeletons' heads. Because of his momentary distraction, another ends up hitting him from behind. Soon, all the skeletons also pierce him with their swords, screaming and laughing happily that they managed to eliminate their enemy. But with a serious voice, the protagonist calls their attention, questioning what they are doing, while we see that none of the swords manage to pierce his skin. Soon he eliminates all the skeletons that are there and says that they are all just flies, wondering if he put too many points in Constitution since his speed is crap and he couldn't dodge. Even seeing the defeat of their companions, a skeleton advances towards him, delivering an attack while the little boy opens the status window. The pure bone doesn't give up and continues to deliver attacks. But seeing that none of them work, he ends up giving up and just waiting for the protagonist to finish what he has to do. Observing his gluttony ability, he realizes he can absorb a target's stats. Then he starts giving malicious smiles, leaving the undead who watches scared. All the soldiers he had previously hit start to rise, while that weird tentacle comes out of his mouth. He says it's showtime, making the skeletons confused with that. The gluttony tentacle goes up, quickly advancing on one of the monsters nearby. He pierces the skeleton's bone and starts absorbing its stats. Then in a few seconds, the immortal skeleton turns to dust, while a notification saying that his stats have leveled up appears, making our hero extremely happy. His stats, which were previously low, start to quickly grow, and realizing that his strength increased by 220, now he can use equipment. Not believing, he left this stolen ability aside, but from now on he won't be so picky and will eat whatever is in front of him. Seeing that scary scene, the undead monsters, beings who are not exactly dead nor alive, lost the sanity they had, leaving only one thing, the purest natural instinct. They are the strongest immortal army who didn't even fear death, but only their instinct told them they should run for their lives. Meanwhile, the reason for their unexpected escape laughs maliciously, while we discover that they are running away simply out of absolute fear. Suddenly, we see the gluttony tentacle going towards the target and hitting the spine of one of the fleeing skeletons, soon being absorbed by the protagonist while nothing is left of his body but dust. Then he attacks several other skeletons, not letting any survive, as they all became nutrients that will make him stronger. The number of skeletons that invaded the initial village was about 2,000. It should have been a power that could even devastate a country, but in a few moments turned to dust in the hand of one person. However, there was still the strongest undead monster of all, the Bone Dragon, and the one who, when Urus disappeared, became in existence, considered as the new supreme of the dragon tribe. But this same supreme dragon is hit by the gluttony tentacle of the little boy, even with its gigantic size and crushing strength, has its head absorbed in the blink of an eye. After a few hours, all the protagonist's stats are maxed out. The little dragon celebrates our hero's victory, saying that the passive boy wouldn't even stand a chance against him now. But while he boasts through his ghost pad, a person approaches, making him very excited, wondering if there are still some desserts, since it would be rude of him to leave food on the plate. But soon the person introduces herself as the sin of lust, Luna, making the protagonist question why she is there and that recently they have been meeting a lot. The young woman cancels her god mode, returning to having pink hair and a black outfit. The little boy questions why she deactivated her mode out of nowhere, and she explains that what she is going to do now should not be observed by anyone, leaving our hero confused by her words, but then extremely surprised, as our waifu advanced towards him, giving him a big kiss.
What do you mean by that?
After this unexpected action from the woman, the little dragon looks extremely shocked for witnessing that. While we see a destroyed scene, the protagonist wonders what happened. He went there to defeat the hero Yopi, but now he is committing the capital sin of lust with the waifu of lust. Again, he wonders what is happening while looking at her extremely scared. The two lips finally separate. Still in shock, he takes several steps back, while blushing and looking at her, trying to reason everything that just happened. Still stuttering, he asks what's up with her and why she did that out of nowhere, noting that she just took his first kiss. Hearing this news, Luna gives a small happy smile, and while moving away to pick up her fallen staff, she replies that was just an accident, since she accidentally slipped and kissed him with tongue for a minute without meaning to. Obviously, our idiot is not the protagonist and knows what she's saying is a lie, since she even held his neck while kissing. But with a little smile, she says that he paid attention to everything even though everything happened so fast, and knows that our young loser has maximized agility, so he could have easily dodged if he wanted to. Realizing he's been found out, the protagonist starts to stutter in denial, but she approaches, asking if he would like to know something, informing that it was also her first kiss, making our young virgin who only played video games understand another world. However, he still tries to play hard to get and continues questioning why she kissed him out of nowhere, but the young woman keeps insisting she just slipped. But changing the subject, she has an item to deliver to him. The addict questions about the item while our waifu says she came there just for that. So she extends her hand and shows a luminous sphere that looks like a mini sun. This item is a jewel from someone not revealed and has the ranking of God. She continues, warning that the fact she gave him this item should not be seen by anyone. That's why she canceled her god mode. However, the protagonist is still suspicious, and even not knowing what she's talking about, it seems serious, so he will accept it. Even so, he's still irritated for being kissed out of nowhere and questions again, but she continues insisting she just slipped. Then she says that this is an important item, so he must take care of it since it will be extremely useful. Then we hear a voice calling for the protagonist, and we see him approaching, running while complaining that he went ahead alone. But as she gets closer, she sees something that leaves her scared. That is the beautiful woman standing next to our protagonist. Seeing this, she automatically stops, while analyzing the situation of those two well, realizing they are very close, automatically activating her womanly instincts and jealousy. Lee normally apologizes to the captain, saying he got too excited and ended up rushing ahead. However, the young woman approaches, pulling his jacket, and with a strangely suspicious voice, asks who is the woman by his side and asks to be introduced. Her face is totally radiant, as if she's not bothered by the situation, but behind that cute face, there is great malice. The protagonist asks if she doesn't remember her since they met before in the past. Then the sin of lust sighs, while activating her god mode, making a golden light illuminate the whole environment. Finally seeing her real appearance, the young woman gets scared, realizing this is the woman she faced in the past. Luna asks if she recognizes her now while calling her overestimated. Han ends up remembering the events of their last encounter, while the waifu asks if the protagonist is going to fight against the hero Yopi, warning that it will not be easy since he reached level 999 with the energy she shared, and by now he must have arrived at that place. A place that exists in the core of the demon world, the Demon King's castle. There we see the hero and his group approaching, while he appears even more powerful than before. In the Great Hall of the Demon King, someone seems to recognize him, calling him the first hero who annihilated the Demon King. Yopi also knows who that creature is and praises the enormous vitality of the great demon's direct assistant. The ghost reminds him that his body is immortal, asking what brings a hero from decades past to this humble place. As he approaches, Yopi says his goal there is obvious. Then he stops in front of a large sword stuck in the ground, explaining that he came to that place for his precious item, the god-ranked hero's long sword. With a malicious look, the ghost asks if he will be okay, since the Demon King's energy was sealed in that sword, and by wielding it again, he probably already knows what will happen. The disaster, with a neutral expression, continues looking at her, while warning that he knows exactly what is going to happen, probably more than anyone else. Then he firmly grips the sword's handle, while the strong green energy begins to circulate the area. Then the system announces that a class change is happening with the hero and that he has awakened the hidden class. The sword, which initially had bright orange traits like the hero, slowly starts to be filled with green energy, while the little ghost seems quite pleased with what is happening. Yopi, now wielding his old sword, finally completes the class change, becoming the new Demon King. The demon assistant celebrates that a new king is born, while the disaster, now with a new appearance, stares at him, receiving the privileges of becoming a demon king and having all his stats increased by 10 times. The hidden class also grants him a new ability called Demon King's Authority, capable of ruling all demon races. The former hero calls the little creature and says that this is his first order as Demon King, commanding him to summon the entire demon army immediately and annihilate the human world. With no expression on his face, the little ghost remains silent, but soon releases a smile, agreeing with his new lord, little by little transforming into smoke and rising through the ceiling. That gooey smoke starts to come out from the top of the tower, while maintaining a look of morbid happiness on his face. And soon we see that little being transform into a giant mass of black matter with a face. The new Demon King commands all units to advance, while Death opens a huge mouth full of sharp teeth, opening a dimensional portal leading to the human world. Then soon the human world and the demonic world. Two dimensions that until now could not interfere with each other, and that only a few people knew the method of dimensional teleportation. The first person was the hero Yopi. Then we see the Captain Love looking at the sky, extremely scared. When the protagonist looks to see what made her like that, he also ends up having the same reaction. The third person capable of using dimensional teleportation is the direct assistant of the demon Death, and it was with this highly recognized ability that made him the direct assistant. From that crack linking the two dimensions, beings start to come out. With sharp teeth and a thirst for blood, that's how it began. The beginning of the demonic army invasion finally started. Thousands and thousands of demons start to come out through the portal, encountering that city in flames. The capital sin of sloth sighs at seeing that scene, while questioning the level of anger of the former hero Yopi, and why he is doing all those things against humanity. However, the protagonist grabs his stick and, even seeing that scary scene, asks why he should care. While delivering an upward strike, just swinging his stick made a huge burst of power be thrown upwards and cross the atmosphere. Content: the protagonist starts to sing, saying he made a great strike, but he gets scared of something. The portal seems to have become even bigger, while more demonic beings emerge. Luna warns that the demonic race possesses unique physical strength and physical abilities, besides an infinite source of magic in their horns. The demonic armies that are already strong alone have gained immortal bodies due to the energy they received from the new Demon King, warning that the demonic race and the undead are the strongest tribes, and not even gluttony could gather an army like that. After warning about the situation, she questions what our protagonist will do and how he will defeat the hero Yopi. Even so, our protagonist just stares at her. Then a magic circle appears at his feet, causing a great upward wind, while a ball appears in front of him. That ball condenses and forms a magic stone capable of creating the cleric's soul ability, and the protagonist uses it to activate the blessing on his staff, since the holy attribute is the best to deal with undead. Now with a face of absolute pleasure, he again strikes upwards, taking a quite suspicious position while displaying his beautiful and radiant muscles. That horde of monsters is suddenly hit by something, and again the protagonist's attack is powerful enough to make that energy leave the atmosphere. Luna watches that scene in disbelief, while wishing she didn't have to witness that scene. The demon tribe is a tribe born with strong bodies and unlimited magic. Besides that, they receive more power from the new Demon King, achieving immortality. It was supposed to be the true strongest tribe, Chrono Life. However, it was practically wiped out in just one attack. This scene leaves Death completely scared, while the protagonist laughs, saying they are nothing but weak monsters who die to attacks with holy attributes. And as he's getting bored, he orders the hero Yopi to appear soon. Suddenly, the smoke starts to gather in some points, and the demonic monsters again begin to regenerate, scaring our protagonist when he sees that scene, since in a few moments all of them recover completely. The young man wonders what they are, since they can resurrect even after being hit with holy attribute strikes, but is answered that this is a hero's ability, and as long as he has mana left, the demonic army will never die. Lee says it will be difficult to fight until the hero's mana runs out, but he just has to make an infinite loop of sanctified strike upwards. To avoid seeing that horrible scene that almost made her gouge her eyes out, Luna recommends he go fight the hero directly, but Lee says he has no idea how to get to the demon world. Hearing this, the captain suggests going through the portal they came from. Since their enemies are coming from the demon world, the portal must lead directly to it. However, the waifu warns that the portal is a one-way hole, and if he enters from this side, he will probably die disintegrated. Getting angry with Han and telling her to shut up, hearing her rival insulting her, the young woman asks who she thinks she is to keep mocking her, noting that no player has been to the demon world to begin with. But at that moment, Lust questions who gave this information, since she, as a goddess, can use dimensional teleportation to the demon world, then extends her hand to the protagonist, telling him to hold it since the reason she came there was to take him to the disaster. Hearing this, the protagonist questions if that was really the reason, since she just gave him an item. But before he finishes his sentence, he realizes something, as she said she deactivated God mode not to be observed, so it means no one should know about him. Finally, he holds the girl's hand and accepts her ride to the demon realm. Seeing that scene, Han questions if he's serious and if he trusts this woman. He says he has no choice, and it's not like there's another way to get to the hero. Meanwhile, Luna is quite embarrassed, since our hero is holding her hand, Then the young woman gives a little smile, while calling the protagonist to go to his goal. The captain shouts asking if she can't take her along, but it's too late and a magic circle appears beneath the two. While a disaster of lust says they are already at maximum capacity and can only take one person in her teleportation, touching the protagonist's shoulder while saying she will enjoy the meeting alone. Seeing the two finish the dimensional teleportation and simply disappear from her sight. The captain seems quite displeased with this, while deciding that from now on, this woman will be her rival. In the demon world, the great demon king's castle presents itself, as the protagonist finally arrives at the location, questioning if they are really inside the demon castle, and starts to look around a bit more, coming across the hero and his subordinates. But Yopi, who is now a disaster, responds that there is no more hero. In this body, there is only fury, and from now on, as one of the 7 deadly sins, he will annihilate these filthy and sordid humans. Suddenly, a huge explosion is seen from the castle, and we realize that it is obviously coming from the protagonist, who just tried to skip the dialogue again, but ended up destroying everything in his path, including the hero and his subordinates. He looks at the waifu saying they're done here, so they should return to the village. But she says it's not over yet, and it's just beginning, making the protagonist confused with her words. Suddenly, the hero says that's amazing, and that not even the last demon king had such a powerful attack. Realizing that he dodged his attack, the protagonist is confused since his attributes are maximized. But while preparing to attack him with his sword, the disaster says that evasion doesn't just depend on attributes, and launches a huge slash with demonic energy at the protagonist, explaining that the pulse reflection, the look, and even the opponent's breathing are things that help predict the movement and dodge strikes. But what he didn't know is that our protagonist was already behind him while saying he will remember that. Yopi wonders how he got there so fast, attacking again with his sword, but the only thing he hits with this attack is the air. And while thinking he disappeared again, he hears a voice coming from the ground. Then we see that the protagonist quickly sneaked under his legs and is staring at him with this scary look. The warrior tries to stab him with his sword but misses, and we realize that all this is just a joke for our protagonist, since with his extremely high agility, mocking the hero became extremely easy. Yopi looks at him with a lot of aggressiveness. Meanwhile, in the human world, demons continue attacking Han. She runs desperately for her life, while screaming that the protagonist is a jerk for leaving her alone. During the escape, she ends up tripping, falling violently to the ground as she crawls. Soon the demonic creature reaches the girl lying down, and goes for a fierce attack against her. But while lying on the ground, she remembers the previous events, getting extremely irritated and preparing to counterattack. Just remembering that woman trying to steal her man makes her blood boil. Then she hits the creature's stomach with an extremely powerful punch. We know that the level of the demons must be at least above 100, while Han is only at 25, so she shouldn't inflict damage, but the gauntlets she possesses have a power that surpasses the level difference, and with just one attack, that creature is knocked down. This power is the hidden ability of the Transcendental Gauntlets, which automatically alters her attack attribute to the enemy's weakness. Some system messages start to appear that she gained experience and leveled up. The experience was so much that from level 25 she went up to 39, since the XP from the demonic army is overwhelming. And with the efficiency of high XP and the main mission bonus, one can gain even more experience than for most bosses. But the truth is that the young woman doesn't care about any of this and just wants to vent her anger on them. However, when she looks up, she realizes that the real problem is the magnitude of the army. She then stops her relentless attacks, while sighing quite stressed with the protagonist, saying that she will finish him off when she gets back. Meanwhile, in the demon castle, the protagonist and the hero stare at each other. Yopi says that he is strong and that he surpasses him in strength and agility, assuming then that the other attributes also surpass him, but the protagonist has already said that all his attributes are maximized, and if he understood the situation well, he should die immediately and stop wasting time. The hero remembers that in the past all his battles were fierce and with almost no chance of victory. Then his former companions who were brought back from the dead appear, and he says that with this group they always manage to win. The protagonist and the little dragon look at that scene, realizing that the guy just called his gang for a one-on-one fight, then says that heroes shouldn't do this and should have a fair one-on-one. Luna suddenly tells him to be careful, saying that the hero group's raid success rate is 100%, asking again for the protagonist to form a group with her. At this moment, we go back to the moment when Captain Love was attacked, but for some reason the creature's attack didn't hit her, since the monster's paw was cut off before it happened. Hannah's confused, trying to understand what happened, while the monster looks at its severed leg and starts to cry out in pain, letting out a loud roar soon after. The one who made this cut and saved the young woman was Captain Hong, who quickly unleashes hundreds of attacks on the demon, cutting it entirely, and quickly finishing it off while its pieces fall to the ground. She then gets up and asks if Miss Hannah's okay, being extremely happy to see her friend. But these good moments won't last forever, as that horde of creatures was advancing against the two. Hong is impressed that so many rare demons are appearing in the human world, and that this seems like a war of humans against demons from classic games, again reaffirming that Chrono Life is very fun. but leaving Han confused about what she's talking about. The guild leader tells her members to attack, telling them to cancel their occupation and show combat mode to protect the initial village. Since the enemies were blessed with immortality, they should sprinkle holy water on their weapons and fight, since the battle against the demon tribe has begun. Soon several assassins from the Robin Hood tribe begin to advance, quickly eliminating the demons that were advancing. Han says that this is the famous Robin Hood guild summon she heard about and that it's her first time seeing it. Actually, Han says this is the second time she's done this since she became the third leader, as the first was in the fight against her boyfriend. Hearing the woman's words, the young woman is happy that she thinks the two are a couple. But suddenly, the conversation is interrupted by an arrow that is shot, piercing several demons at once. Han looks back already knowing who did it, and then the man reveals himself as the leader of the Justice Hawkeye's Guild. He says he received a report from the Sentinels and informs that the Justice Guild will also participate in this war. Seeing two of the great guilds unite to fight together, the young woman is happy, but this is not all. Hong says this is an all-out war, and soon we see the Divine Guild, the Cross Guild, and the Holy Land Guild approaching. And soon a huge human army is formed in the fight against the demonic army. Those beasts with no humanity continue advancing fiercely, while the human players fight to protect the game they love so much. Inside the demon world, there is also a war going on. The skeleton bard starts playing a song, activating the thunderous ability Seraphim's Chant. Soon musical notes fill the entire Demon King's hall, impressing the protagonist, while the waifu says that the thunderous ability is a song that beats in the rhythm of time, notifying that the hero's group has finally started the raid and that you should form a group. Noticing the insistence of that woman, the protagonist flips her off while cursing her, replying that he doesn't want to form a group and doesn't know what she's plotting. However, to deal with a group of idiots like this, he alone is enough, then quickly prepares for an advance, rushing for an attack. In just a few moments, Lee approaches the hero's group, facing the bard. This speed is so overwhelming that no one could react, and he says he is just following the rule of focusing on the supports first, but before he can hit, his staff is stopped by the great hero, who quickly managed to react to his speed, and with a simple movement of his sword, manages to deflect the trajectory of the protagonist's strike, making that immense attack land elsewhere. Euros says that he deflected the attack by spinning the sword blade, but the waifu warns that it was the perfect parry, a skill the hero acquired after much training. However, it's a skill that fails if you're a millisecond late, so if you keep attacking, you can overcome it. But suddenly, the Seraphim's Chant is activated, and due to the time fluctuation, the speed of the group members increased. The hero takes advantage of the buff to attack the protagonist, who manages to defend himself and says that even though he's gotten faster, it's still not enough. But he probably spoke too soon, since his little pet dragon is quite scared looking at something. The reason for this fear is the hero, who increases power even more using the hidden skill Hero's Glory, which sacrifices a large portion of his strength and temporarily doubles all other attributes. At this moment, the disaster advances towards the protagonist with the aim of eliminating him, trying to land several attacks on him while he only defends himself. Yopi well represents his capital sin and shows a lot of anger in each of his attacks, while the protagonist just defends against all of them, realizing that this is practically like playing with an angry cat. But soon his attention shifts to something else, noticing that the team's mage is preparing a spell in his direction. Suddenly, the skull spell is finished, and a giant whirlwind begins to form above the protagonist. Suddenly, the mage pulls an Uchiha Madara and summons a meteor, which quickly falls towards the castle. The protagonist thinks this is that OP arcane spell, and this is his first time seeing it in person. With his current agility, he could easily dodge this attack, but while preparing to deflect the meteor, he thinks it wouldn't be fun if he did that. And soon we see a great explosion comparable to a nuclear one coming from the castle, and with it the protagonist remains intact while the meteor's debris starts to fall. Now that he managed to defend against another enemy attack, he asks if there is anything else to show, getting frustrated imagining that they have run out of tricks and telling them to stop wasting his time and finish it. Yopi, who was supposed to be a final villain, seems quite tired, but says that unfortunately, they're just getting started. Quickly, a huge rainbow light begins to surround the hero's group, and Seraphim's Chant verse 2 is finally activated. This skill has a hidden effect capable of halving the enemy's attributes, and soon all the protagonist's stats that were at 99 drastically drop to 49. Yopi responds that this is his trump card, and with his attributes being multiplied by 10 due to the hidden Demon King class plus the Bard's buff, they are now on par, notifying that even if the protagonist uses gluttony with his perfect parry, those disgusting tentacles won't reach him. And now he asks the same question, wondering if the protagonist has shown everything he has. Our hero just looks at all of this without showing a reaction, but suddenly starts laughing while wondering if he should use that. These words awaken curiosity in the resurrected hero, while Euros knows he will probably use the hidden ability the passive boy used. Our protagonist then starts to pull something out of his coat, and when he pulls it out, it totally startles the little dragon, realizing that in his hands is Habak's mirror. Activating the hidden ability 8 Visions, the protagonist's body starts to vibrate, and soon also starts to grow larger and larger. The hero and his group look at that scene in fear. Then the demon world, which is a dimension far from the human world, had its symbolic black sky changed to a white sky. So we return to the war of humans against demons. Without any hesitation, Han advances to battle against her opponents, jumping at high speed while spinning in the air, finishing the demonic creature with a beautiful kick to its face. She lands softly on the ground as the creature falls. And again, another level up notification appears, and now we see that Love is at level 74. Looking up, she realizes that even having eliminated several, they keep coming. Even wondering if she's going crazy, as it seems there are more now than before. But Hong tells her she's not crazy and that usually demons can be exterminated with holy attacks, but with the Demon King's protection, they are all reviving. To make matters worse, Yopi has infinite mana, so none of them will die until he himself is eliminated. The captain complains, saying that the main scenario missions should be difficult and not impossible. But soon something catches her attention. Quickly coming from the sky, a demonic creature appears aiming to devour her. And even tired, the young woman prepares to counterattack. Suddenly, we see someone's staff glowing, and a woman using flame magic, who shoots a giant fireball, piercing the demonic creature in the middle, and easily eliminating it. The mage says there is only one condition to complete the mission. That is by defeating Yopi, the Sin of Wrath. Hearing this, Love questions the point of the war, as they could just log out and wait for Kukwinha to defeat him. But soon she is informed that if they do that, then all the plants, animals, and humans living in this world would die. And if that happened, this world would also become a demonic world. Even scared, she thinks the game company could fix it with an update, but Hong reminds her of the announcement they made, mentioning that from today on, the world's fate will be determined by the main mission results, and the game's future is in the player's hands. This literally means that for the first time in gaming history, everything, even the game itself, depends on the players. Then we see the headquarters of the Chrono Life company. There we see the company owner watching everything happening inside the game, determined to abandon it if things go wrong. While calling them crazy, she says this is a lazy way to manage the game, wondering how on earth the #1 gaming company in the world doesn't have a solution. But soon the guild leader says that's exactly why she likes this game so much. However, Love is completely against these ideas and says the other players need to know too. But before she can finish her sentence, she's interrupted by Hong eliminating a demon in front of her. Abracadabra appears, asking the young woman not to worry, as most regular players are already aware, and that's why everyone is participating in the war. Then we see a bald man and his group attacking a demon. Knowing that its weakness is in its head, they all band together to try to knock down its leg first. Seeing this scene, Han is happy to realize that it's not just the top 5 guilds fighting, while the mage compliments, explaining that everyone has been fighting together from the beginning to protect the fate of this world. But soon reality shows itself, with the man extremely happy with the unique item drop. All the players are there only because they can use the high XP demon monsters to farm experience and items. Seeing this grotesque scene of players like lunatics against the demon, the two remain silent. Then we return to the protagonist's battle, where the supposed final villain is extremely scared. While looking at the protagonist's underwear that is gigantic in the demon world sky, the skeletal bard continues to play his melody, activating more effects of Seraphim's chant that reduce the enemy's attributes to a 5th. Seeing this, the little dragon complains that this skill is too overpowered and that the protagonist's healing factor should cancel it. Then we see that the skill not only immediately recovers any damage received, but gives complete immunity to status effects. However, Luna reminds that this is not a status effect skill, but one that reverses the target's time. Still, Kukwinha, who is now Kyuko, is out of his reach. Soon a voice is heard from the sky calling the Demon King Yopi, questioning if it was Perfect Parry, the name of the skill he used earlier. Actually, this is quite interesting, as it completely negates the enemy's attack. But with this scary expression while emerging from the clouds, he tells the hero to try using it once more. The final villain now finds himself at a complete disadvantage looking up, while the protagonist, already practically the size of the demon planet, prepares a downward strike, quickly swinging his stick, which in comparison to the castle is extremely gigantic, getting closer and closer to that structure. While the Demon King and his group can only watch it approach, Yopi, frightened, watches the devastating attack, finally accepting his sad defeat, as the wooden stick hits the castle squarely, not only destroying it but the entire demon planet, which soon explodes in a supernova with the protagonist still on top. A notification explaining that he pushed the amplifier lenses to the extreme appears, and Lee, now drifting through space, finally shrinks back to his normal size. Looking at his magic mirror and seeing it's already broken, he looks at all the damage caused and thinks he destroyed a planet again, but this time the server didn't crash. The little Eurus approaches, saying he's back to normal size and explaining that he only survived the attack because he's a spirit. Soon another survivor also catches his attention. It's the goddess, questioning how he will deal with the consequences of his actions. Lee is confused, wondering how she didn't die, and quickly begins to look around, fearing the hero might have survived too. Soon he sees Yopi sitting on a part of the castle that remained. However, he is completely beaten up and his armor totally destroyed. The protagonist only says that he is really tough since he didn't die after the explosion. But Limit explains that the hero will soon die as he is on the verge of death. Even his companions have returned to the void, so he will probably be next. Kukwina asks if this is true, saying he will now complete the main mission. Approaching the fallen hero, he explains that he won't need to do anything as the man will be finished on his own. And he said he knows that as he can barely keep his eyes open. So our comedian takes the opportunity to tease his enemies, saying he is weak. And Yopi complains that today's heroes have no manners, much less humility. Even so, he is probably the strongest person he has ever encountered, admitting he was completely defeated. Back in the initial village, the demon's rampant attack continues. The creatures advance fiercely towards the players, who are already quite fatigued due to the long battle time, being easily eliminated by the monsters. Actually, the battle that until now was tied begins to suffer a unilateral victory on the demon's part. An Archer Guild member warns his leader that they are being pressed, but he asks them to hold firm and endure, since their role in this battle is not to win but to buy time until that guy defeats Yopi. Even already accepting that after the battle they will suffer irreparable losses but must endure as long as possible. Love is shown to be quite tired of the battle, sighing, and with her clothes quite torn and dirty due to the battle, she no longer has the strength to stand. Seeing her friend on the ground, Hong asks if she's okay, while the young woman tries to stay strong, saying she will return to the fight as soon as she recovers. But when looking at her true state, she realizes something. The reason she can't fight anymore is that the girl has already reached her mental limit. Not just her, but everyone present is already exhausted, and if this continues, the entire initial village will be destroyed. At this moment, the Robin Hood Guild captain is caught off guard by a demon, who starts to press her, greatly reducing her HP. And when she is about to give up the fight, a hand simply begins to crumble in the air, leaving Hong very confused with this situation, while seeing all the demonic creatures present starting to vanish in the sky. Like the day Thanos snapped his fingers, all the monsters simply turned to dust. Hong, still looking up and confused about the situation, wonders what's going on, while Love seems to know exactly the situation. If the monsters are disappearing, it's probably because Kukwinha managed to win. At this moment, we see the protagonist looking at Yopi's body, now shining a lot. He says his time is up and he will soon disappear. But Lee has a question to ask before he disappears, questioning why the hero who once killed the Demon King in the past hates humans so much. Yopi only comments that this is a boring and quite cliche story, explaining that actually it was because he was extraordinary. Because of that, everyone around him loved him, but those same people invite him. Then small drops begin to fall to the ground, as the hero says that actually he is just a person who loves humans. Observing from afar, the goddess remains neutral, while listening to the hero's last words. Realizing he was someone who loved humans more than anyone. Like an explosion of lights, the hero disappears, and system notifications saying he managed to complete the mission alone appear. With them, the reward for completing the main scenario also appears in front of him. As he grabs that treasure chest, new messages appear saying he is the mission's top contributor, so he will receive an additional reward. Suddenly, a strong light begins to shine in space, and when it gets closer, it ends up surprising our protagonist. He arrives saying it's been a long time since they last met and didn't expect to see him so soon. This person is obviously the self-proclaimed god. He praises the protagonist, saying he always watched and was sure he would win against Yopi. He will also give the additional reward for being the top contributor in the mission. Then a screen appears in front of the protagonist, and when he reads the information on it, he is surprised, as it's an invitation to advance to the Capital Sin class. God comments that he can remain human or become a disaster, explaining that the hero also received the same reward when he defeated the Demon King. But he chose to be human and eventually had a terrible death. Eventually, as we know, he was reborn as one of the 7 deadly sins filled with fury against humans. But that's already too much story, and the only thing he wants is for the protagonist to make his choice now. Our Kukwinha looks at that man with a bit of anger in his eyes, soon reflecting on what he should do. But the truth is he doesn't even need to think about his choice, then presses one of the options, while behind the goddess and the dragon coast watch. She seems to have seen what the protagonist chose, while the little dragon tells her to move aside so he can see too. Surprised by the protagonist's choice, Luna just watches in shock, while God seems quite displeased, questioning him why he made that choice. But that should have been quite obvious given his personality. The next day, we see the protagonist's residence building, while he is just lying on his bed vegetating. Suddenly, his phone starts ringing, catching his attention, and when he goes to see who it is, he realizes he received a message from Han Sarang asking what he is doing. Kukwinha responds that he was just vegetating, while the young woman complains that he was acting like an NEET for doing that so often. But that ends up irritating the protagonist, who considers himself a legend for what he did and also needs to rest from time to time. Then Han warns that her class will end soon, and if he isn't doing anything, they should go out to eat later. Reading this unexpected message, the protagonist is startled, while wondering if she sent the message to the wrong person since there's no reason for her to make this invitation out of the blue. But suddenly, our waifu appears beside him while warning that the young woman is flirting with him. However, the protagonist hasn't realized the situation yet and only says that students should focus on their studies. Suddenly startled while wondering what she's doing in his apartment, and falling to the floor shortly after, while the young woman tells him to be careful as it must hurt to fall out of bed. Irritated, he says he only fell because of her, while asking how she managed to get into his house again without him noticing, telling her not to try to change the subject, otherwise he will report her to the police for invasion. Luna hands over a folded shirt while explaining that he's too hasty, as she only came there to return the shirt she borrowed earlier. But of course this confuses Kukuna since he doesn't remember lending any clothes to her. However, he ends up recalling his last meeting with her in real life, and realizing that the young woman was wearing his shirt that time. Luna explains that she ended up borrowing it from his closet without him noticing, but quickly changes the subject, questioning what he will do now, since he received an invitation to go out to eat, immediately saying she also wants to go. The woman's cheekiness is such that it leaves Kukuna completely stunned, but convincing her otherwise is also very difficult, and soon we see Han extremely irritated in the restaurant, while Luna calmly eats her food. Our innocent young protagonist is between the two, while clearly knowing he made a mistake by letting her come. Han calls his name, completely scaring him, and with an extremely frightening expression questions what this woman is doing there, since this dinner was supposed to be just the two of them. He tries to change the subject, saying the three of them often meet in the game, so he thought it would be nice to eat together, but soon wonders why he's making excuses since he did nothing wrong. In the end, he only met that woman, so he doesn't need to care about her presence. Hearing her beloved's words, the evil spirit inhabiting this woman's heart attacks, and she questions what he is talking about, since a little while ago the two were lying side by side on the bed. Against these facts, our hero has no arguments, and Han automatically appears asking what she meant by that in a threatening tone while he just thinks he had a good life. Sighing, Luna says she couldn't understand this situation very well, as frankly, the two are not dating, so there is no reason for Miss Love to question the protagonist this way. But she counters the argument saying they are group mates, and there's no problem taking care of her companions. Then again questions what her relationship with Kukuna is, even calling her a stalker. Luna says that Mr. Loser and she have a very special relationship, both in reality and in the game. These words end up reminding the protagonist of what happened in his last meeting with her, and the big kiss the young woman gave him. Nervous, Lee only says he's not so sure about that, saying that doesn't count since it was in the game and not in reality. But she said that every sensation in Chrono Life is exactly like reality. Even so, she approaches asking if they should use this opportunity to compensate for the sensation. But soon they are interrupted by the captain shouting and telling them to stop doing that in a public place. Also asking them to stop saying things only they know, questioning what is this story about comparable sensation to reality. But soon their thoughts meet and the penny drops, immediately realizing what those two did inside the game. And with a trembling voice tries to confirm the hypothesis in her head, while Luna doesn't even wait for her to finish, saying that it was exactly that, and that she thought she was just a cute little girl who didn't understand anything but seems quite mature. Han, extremely irritated, gets up from the table, while with a cold look says she is leaving. The waifu only laughs seeing her rival leave, while the protagonist only says she should eat quickly and go too. Then a few hours pass and the day is already turning to night. The young woman with a smile says she is already full, thanking the protagonist since the restaurant was really good, but that next time she will take him to a place she knows. Suddenly the young woman stops while still staring at him, while remembering that this scene is the same as the last time when the sun was also setting. She is referring to their first meeting, soon questioning about his choice of reward he got for being the top contributor. Our Cupina questions why she is asking that since he explained the reason just yesterday, but the young woman thinks he has some hidden motivation like love for Han Sarang, imagining that maybe she is the reason for his choice. Our hero only keeps his unshakable face hearing this, while saying he has no idea what she's talking about, saying goodbye right after. Sometime later he reconnects to Chrono Life again, being welcomed by Euros who greets him, while complaining that it took him an entire day to log in this time. The little ghost starts looking around, realizing this is an alley in the initial village and wondering why they are there. Probably because the demon world is gone, but that's also great since no one is passing by and he can just stay there relaxing nicely. The dragon is confused by this as he could rest in reality, but our protagonist's reality is quite troubled at the moment. Soon after, a wooden stick falls beside him, making the protagonist quite confused while looking at who threw it, soon realizing it was the young boy he met at the beginning of the game. Excitedly, the little character jumps while saying hi, but our hero seems extremely frightened by his presence. At this moment, it's already night and we see Chrono Life's headquarters, where the president is watching something with great attention. This something is obviously our protagonist meeting the young boy. A member questions what he will do about that, but the man only wishes to continue monitoring, while thinking he can't believe this meeting happened now all possible times, calling that child a toy of God. Inside the game, the protagonist says it's a pleasure to see him again, asking how long it's been. But we realize he got too excited and is shaking the child up and down hard. Soon he asks him to sit down while saying he didn't expect to find him there, again questioning how much time has passed. The little one is confused by his words while our hero realizes he might not remember, explaining that the last time they met was when he tried to reinforce the equipment but failed. But the young boy still doesn't seem to remember. Suddenly an idea comes to his mind and it seems he finally remembers. But the truth is he just thinks the protagonist looks like the golden statue in the village. Hero's observing that questions who this little bald guy is, leaving the young boy very excited while the protagonist asks if he can see him. But soon the little dragon reminds him that he borrowed his power to materialize back then. Lee then introduces his pet dragon while offering the boy to hold him. Again, the proud dragon questions how a mere human dares to lay hands on him. But the protagonist tells him to shut up while the young boy grabs him. He then holds his big stick in his hand, while talking about the day he received it as a gift from the little bald guy, thanking him immensely since thanks to him his life was completely changed. Lee then questions if the young boy would like to hear some of the things he's been through. The little bald guy seems quite curious, while the protagonist explains all the story's events up to that point. Actually, this is quite fascinating and one of the rarest things in his life. As someone who doesn't like stories, he had never told his own to anyone, but at that moment he is telling everything he went through, even his most intimate feelings. So after a few hours of long conversations, he gets to the part where he had to choose between staying human or becoming a capital sin, making a small suspense while questioning him what his answer is. But the excited young boy has no idea, and the protagonist explains he preferred to stay human, making the little boy question the reason for that as he got curious. But as he gets up, Kukunhe says he will tell that story later, since he has something to give him first. Then makes a strong invocation, spreading several transcendent rank items on the ground. He said it's a gift, telling the little bald guy to take them all since he doesn't need them. But humbly the young boy refuses, saying he doesn't need them either, while the protagonist doesn't understand why, as they are quite valuable. The little bald guy then takes a paper and writes something, handing it to the protagonist right after. Lee reads the letter's content, being surprised. Then the scene cuts to a large hospital. Since that paper the boy gave him had an unknown address, and at that address someone was unexpectedly waiting for him. When he finally opens the door ready to find out who the player behind the character is, he faces the only person who shared his stories, the only one he opened up to, and realizes that the boy was actually a young girl diagnosed with an incurable disease and had only 2 weeks to live. The two stare at each other in that hospital room, while our protagonist seems extremely shocked by all that, but the little girl just gives him a charismatic look, giving small pats on the bed asking him to come closer. So obeyingly grabs a nearby chair to approach the girl's bed, while she takes a notebook to write a message. The reality is she feels very sorry and knows he is probably surprised by all of this. She didn't want to seem rude but really wanted to meet him, so she gave the address. Besides, her body isn't very well, so she can't speak, but the protagonist only says she doesn't need to apologize for that. Again, the girl writes in her notebook, saying the stories he told in the game were very exciting, so she would like Appa to hear hers. Of course, they might not be as exciting, but still, she would like to have this selfish request fulfilled. Lee gives a small sigh at the child's motivation, saying that this is not selfish, and that since he has free time and likes to hear stories, he will stay there to listen. But the girl knows he hates stories as he always skips dialogues in games. So the girl explains there is a very wide variety of classes in Chrono Life, and among all the options, the one the girl chose was to become a merchant. As a merchant, she could talk to a lot of different people as she bought and sold items. And since in real life she never had many friends because she was shy, in the game she could be someone completely different. Everyone in the initial village treated her super well with radiant smiles, and it was thanks to them that every day was amazing. Then we see the association president. He said the girl was really kind and graceful. Whenever she had the chance, she gave potions to novices for free, even knowing she would lose money selling the items at a banana price. Technically, she didn't have the aptitude to be a merchant, but everyone liked that child, not only the players, but even the NPCs. Maybe she wasn't the game's most brilliant player, but she was the light of a star that delicately illuminated the environment around her. But one day, she stopped logging into the game. People thought she might have gone to focus on her studies or was taking a break. Everyone found different reasons to miss that child, and without even realizing it, a lot of time had passed. Those people who used to accompany her leveled up and left the initial village. As new players appeared, almost no one knew her in that village. But one day, that child returned to the game. However, her appearance had changed a lot since the last time. She no longer had her beautiful pigtails and was wearing the cheapest clothes in the game. But her acts of charity continued, and she kept giving items to new players. But this time she never said anything to them and only sent emoticons. Probably she must have given all the items and gold in her inventory. As she started giving the stick you could get for free in the shop, the man who received the child's gift was not pleased at all, throwing it on the ground while saying he got excited because he discovered someone was giving things for free. That child looks at her gift on the ground, but keeps her joy and picks it back up. Suddenly she hears someone screaming in complete despair, coming from an alley right beside her. When the young girl goes to investigate what it is, she sees the protagonist completely dismayed, looking at all the items he tried to enhance on the ground, while tears fall from his eyes. She realizes this might be the perfect moment to gift someone. so she decides to approach him to give him the stick. This was the end of the girl's story, but the beginning of the protagonist's. The story of our Kyukunha and the level 999 stick.
Guys, the video is over. I just wanted to ask for your attention real quick. For those who aren't subscribed, please subscribe and leave a like, it helps a lot. 87% of the audience isn't subscribed, so if you want to help, please subscribe.